won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Going head-to-head in a clash of minds over the next hour is GB News presenter and former MEP Martin Daubney, and also senior political commentator for GB News, Nigel Nelson. Then joining me between 4 and 6 are author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Then stay tuned because at 5 o'clock I'll be joined by a transgender man who regretted his transitioning ever since. Scott Nugent has an incredible story. You will not want to miss that. He'll be live in the studio just after 5 o'clock. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Red Cross has sent planes with medical supplies to the port of Sudan. That's following the final evacuation flight carrying British nationals that departed Khartoum late last night. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden said rescue operations ended following a significant decline in the number of British nationals coming forward to flee. Nearly 1,900 people on 21 flights have been evacuated. However, there are still thousands of British citizens stuck amid fighting. NHS nurses across the country will walk out from 8 o'clock this evening in a 28-hour strike over pay. In a ballot earlier this month, 54% of RCN members rejected the government's offer of a 5% pay rise. Great Ormond Street Hospital is among organisations where nurses have agreed to keep limited staff on after voicing serious concerns about patient safety during the walkout. NHS England is urging the public to use the health service wisely. It said emergency and urgent care would remain the priority. The head of global projects at Young Voices UK, Jason Reed, told GB News the nurses' strike is the wrong thing to do.
Just hate to think of all those patients and all those families who will suffer directly as a result
of what the RCN are doing. If they really were concerned about patient safety, I don't think that they would be doing this. I don't think you could have a clear conscience to walk out if you're an intensive care nurse or a cancer nurse and say that it was patient safety that was motivating you. Pretty clearly, they just want to squeeze a few extra pounds out of the government, our money, of course, that we're paying through taxes. And so it's just not a situation that the government should give into and set a precedent for future strikes, that this is an okay thing to do.
But the assistant editor at Prospect magazine, Emily Crawford, says the nurses are putting patients' lives at risk due to being overworked.
If nurses have been so overworked and understaffed for the past few years, that in itself has been a risk to patient safety anyway. Last year there were 40,000 full-time nurses vacancies in England. If we've got massive gaps like that, I think patient safety has already been at risk for a while.
The Prime Minister has slammed what he's called selfish saboteurs who force traffic to go slow. Rishi Sunak told The Sun on Sunday that he wants to put a stop to those who use this tactic. Ministers want police to be able to stop slow walkers, but Labour says the government is just chasing headlines. It comes as ministers plan to push through measures to widen the legal definition of serious disruption to enable officers to stop activists interfering with traffic. 5 people, including an 8-year-old child, have been killed in a shooting at a home in Texas. Officials from the San Jacinto County Sheriff's Office attended the scene after they received a call about harassment. Several victims had been shot by the time police arrived. The suspect is armed and still on the run. The British Army has begun rehearsals for the coronation of King Charles. Soldiers from all divisions of the armed forces have gathered at training areas across South London to prepare for the biggest ceremonial event of their lives. Soldiers have flown home from operational duties or training exercises from as far as Cyprus, Iraq, Kenya and Estonia to represent their regiments and corps at the event. Representatives from the nation's faith communities will play an active role in the event for the first time in history. When King Charles is crowned, leaders from Jewish, Hindu, Sikh, Muslim and Buddhist groups will deliver a greeting to the King in unison. The Archbishop of Canterbury says the service will be foremost an act of Christian worship, but that new elements will reflect the diversity of modern society. And the Stone of Destiny has been welcomed to England in a special ceremony ahead of the coronation. It dates back to the 12th century and is normally on display at Edinburgh Castle. It will sit under the King's throne next weekend and has been used in coronations for nearly 1,000 years. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana.
Hello, good afternoon. This is coming up to 6 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before we get stuck into our debates over the next hour, let me introduce you to my panel. Going head-to-head today is GB News presenter and contributor Martin Daubeny and also political editor Nigel Nelson. Now, here's what else is... Smile, Nigel, crikey. Oh, miserable looking. He'll be OK. Here's what else is coming up today on today's head-to-head. A senior Tory MP is blaming the small boats crisis on the incompetence of the Home Office. It comes as Suella Braverman's illegal migration bill, and the bill isn't illegal, but it does sound like it, aimed at stopping people crossing the Channel in small boats, cleared the Commons this week with 289 votes to 230. It comes as the final evacuation flight carrying British nationals has left Sudan last night. Next, ahead of the industrial action by the RCN, members they're starting this evening, the RCN chief has warned the UK could face years of nurses' strikes if the government doesn't change its strategy on pay. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has been challenged over reparations in the Commons. Labour MP.
The Prime Minister today if he will do what Bernie Grant asked all those years ago, what I have asked and what countless others have asked since, and offer a full and meaningful apology for our country's role in slavery and colonialism and commit to reparatory justice.
Well, no, Mr. Speaker. What I think our focus should now be on doing is, of course, understanding our history in all its parts, not running away from it, but right now making sure that we have a society which is inclusive and tolerant of people from all backgrounds. Trying to unpick our history is not the right way forward, and it's not something that we will focus our energies on.
So Labour MP Bill Ribeiro Addy called for an apology over the UK's historic role in slavery and colonialism, but Rishi Sunak refused to apologise. He said that he was committed to ensuring the UK is an inclusive and tolerant society, and trying to unpick our history is not the right way to go forward. And would you pledge your allegiance to the King? Royal fans. Oh, so welcome aboard. This is GB News. Just coming up to 8 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Now, a senior Tory MP is blaming the small boats crisis on the incompetence of the Home Office. So Bob O'Neill, who chairs the Justice Select Committee, told GB News illegal migrants aren't being processed quickly enough because of a lack of resources. Suella Braverman's illegal migration bill aimed at stopping people crossing the Channel in small boats cleared the Commons last week with 289 votes to 230. And this comes as the final evacuation flight carrying British nationals has left Sudan last night. Now, the government says the rescue mission has been extremely successful but can't last forever, as thousands more British citizens may still be stranded. It's amid reports of the Sudanese armed forces, which had blocked some Brits crossing through Khartoum to get to the airship. Martin and Nigel. We got to the end of that one. Who wrote that? Right, I'll start with you, Nigel. What do you think?
What, about the Sudanese?
Well, not about them, but about the... No, seriously, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, the whole thing didn't go as well as our ministers are claiming. So we certainly arrived 24 hours late to the party anyway. And of course, there was the whole row about getting NHS doctors on board who weren't British passport holders but did hold a work permit to come back to Britain. Eventually they did get on board, but the whole point was they shouldn't have been prevented because of red tape. And I think that we have the same sort of problem in Sudan as we had with Afghanistan. We're just never prepared for these things. So Afghanistan was based on preparations for an evacuation from Jamaica, taking British tourists back if there'd been an earthquake. The soldiers were confronted by a completely different thing in Afghanistan, and as a result of that, they then had to actually use their initiative about the best way of doing it. What seemed to happen over in Sudan was that our soldiers weren't allowed to use their initiative, so they couldn't say, well, look, obviously you're an NHS doctor, you should be allowed on board this flight. Instead, they turned them away until the Foreign Office and James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, turned around and said, no, actually, we made a bit of a mistake here, and we'll allow them on board.
Well, are they right, do you think, now to stop the process? Because obviously there are no other safe and legal routes now for those in Sudan to get to this country. I mean, that's the end of it. We've got our people out, supposedly, and now there don't appear to be any safe and legal routes.
Well, I mean, the moment is that the doctors should be out by now, so we haven't got a particular problem there. The next problem, obviously, is if the civil war develops, you're looking at a major humanitarian crisis, then what do you do about that? Now, I mean, I think that public opinion can change very quickly. At the moment, it feels to me like we're saying, no, we won't accept Sudanese refugees. If you remember back in 2015, when a little boy, Ayhan Ayudi, ended up dead on a Turkish beach, a Syrian, after trying to make the journey over from Syria. That changed the public perspective. We arranged a settlement scheme for 20,000 Syrians. They've settled in really well. The same thing could happen here, but the important thing is you would take people from refugee camps, not crossing boats across the Channel.
What do you think?
Isn't it funny how liberals on the left always say, stop being a white saviour in Africa until there's another civil war, and we're expected to be precisely that. We haven't been involved in Sudan since the 1950s. To intimate that this is in any way comparable to Afghanistan, I think is misrepresenting reality. And the idea we got our nationals out is absolutely correct and the right thing to do. But if we say, OK, well, I'm sort of third cousin much removed from this person, therefore you should get me in, and let's extend it to any refugee, then it's ostensibly we become home to any civil war, any catastrophe throughout the planet. And let's look at Sudan in general. Sudan is a country that's harboured some of the world's most dangerous terrorists. It's knowingly and willingly harboured Hamas, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State. If we throw open anybody in Sudan who wants safe passage. It could mean inviting terrorists into our country.
Same argument though about the Syrians at the time, that obviously ISIS were in Syria, and the fear was that we'd be bringing terrorists over. That didn't happen. We actually got the right 20,000 people, and we've settled them successfully in this country.
But you must concur that if it's our job to invite anybody from around the world during any civil war because of what? Of guilt? Of history? The French...
Well, compassion, actually.
The French were there after us, and we only went there to stop the French decimating the country when we helped the Egyptians. So the idea that since the 1950s we're still responsible for the fate of the Sudanese people is for the birds.
No, I'm not even suggesting that. I mean, we weren't responsible for the Syrian civil war either. But we decided as an act of humanity that we would take in 20,000 refugees. As I say, it was based on one picture, really, because that's what changed the attitude of the British people. So I'm not saying we take everybody in. I'm not saying we're responsible for every crisis that happens around the world. But we play our part along with international partners.
But it has been happening. So for the Ukraine, we had a refugee system. And indeed, that there are hundreds and hundreds of flats being built, for example, in Ireland, that have been given to Ukrainians when there is a huge homelessness problem amongst the indigenous population of Ireland. And I think we have to just draw a line somewhere. The rules are the rules for a purpose, and that is British nationals, yes, we have a duty and an obligation. But to say anybody who feels unsafe can come to Britain is the precise problem. The British people, time and time again, have voted to take control of our borders. We cannot do that in any capacity. So if we can't control the dinghies coming in, if we can't control people coming in on student visas and overstaying, why should we then say any civil war in the world, yeah, come on, you're all welcome to Britain? There has to be a limit to our hospitality and the financial requirements. We can't afford to do it, Nigel.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. There has to be a limit, which is why limits are set. When it comes down to the Ukrainians, they'll probably go home as soon as the war is over. They'll want to rebuild their country. We've also taken in Afghans because we owe them something, because they worked and fought for the British when we were over there. And we are also fulfilling our responsibilities to Hong Kongers who are coming over as well. The point I'm talking about here is that all those things have not caused a major problem. There have been some problems, I accept, but not a major problem.
Well, they have caused problems that the media don't like to talk about, such as violence and sexual harassment on the streets, hotels being closed to British people, housing stock being hoovered up by Serco, which would be normally for British people. Rents are going through the roof, and there's an ongoing knock-on process of a housing shortage, and then there's wage suppression, there's an illegal black market. We know there are massive problems every time we invite a fresh wave of people in from a disaster-torn country.
We haven't actually. I mean, OK, so we've absolutely British people who are in Sudan or people who are connected to this country who have been brought out from there. Great, perfect. But do we really have the capacity in this country to keep doing this? Because we can't even look after ourselves right now. It's seriously.
Well, because of the various other settlement schemes, we took in, I mean, net immigration last year was 500,000. It'll probably be an awful lot less this year.
It's more like a million.
Well, the actual the net migration, because a load of people left as well. So far more EU citizens left Britain than actually arrived, for instance. But no, we don't have an endless capacity. But what we should have is to respond to situations as they happen. I mean, Martin seems to be suggesting that we shouldn't have taken Ukrainians in.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that was a European, partner with a direct line to our country. It's not the same in Sudan. It isn't the same.
No, but who were you suggesting that we didn't take in? Out of the various people who came in under settlement schemes, which is completely different from asylum applications, should we not have taken the people from Hong Kong? Should we not have taken the Afghans? Should we not have taken Ukrainians? I mean, who was it that we shouldn't take?
Because there's a system in place, a set of rules that aren't arbitrary. It's not anybody is welcome. It's basically, if you're a British national or from a former British colony, which Sudan is not, then that we have to have parameters.
But that's the evacuation process.
Otherwise, we have open borders.
No, I take that point, but when you talk about British nationals, that is the emergency evacuation bit.
And that's been done.
And that is being done, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know if we got everybody out, but yes, I mean, they seem to have got at least 1,500 out. What we're talking about is what happens next. And if Sudan develops into a serious civil war and a major humanitarian crisis, what our response should be in that situation.
But the left always say, stop meddling in foreign problems, stop warmongering. I know Tony Blair was the exception to the rule there.
That didn't work.
But why is it that it's like every time that there's a foreign war, it's like, don't get involved, Britain, don't be a white saviour, except until it happens, and then we're thought of as exclusionary, small-minded and racist for saying, hang on a minute, there has to be limits to our hospitality.
Well, we're not meddling, we're defending people.
Let's see what people are saying here, because I've got some emails in already. We've got Booker, who said, Nigel and his throwaway thousands of Syrians have settled here successfully. Really? What real evidence has he got? And what does he really mean, successfully? Just ask you that.
What is the... Sorry, I missed
because you said thousands of Syrians have settled here successfully.
Yeah,
really,
20,000.
What evidence have you got that they're successful? He said.
Well, put it a different way. What evidence is they've caused any problems?
Oh, I see. So that's what he's saying. Let's see. Nicholas says, so glad your hosts try and seek balance and think quick to find a positive. It's good. It's a compliment. That's a compliment. We don't have to get this, so we're kind of like, we're all in shock. What? A compliment. And then the guy on the right, I think that must be you, Nigel. You're on my right or my left. I'm supposed to be watching on the right. The guy on the right said, British people want us to take refugees in. When was that vote held or referendum? Where is his facts on that statement? That's Andy. Thank you for that, Andy. Right, and it's, let's see, Britain shouldn't be expected to open the door to anyone from anywhere across the world. Come here because they have issues in their own country. It is foolish and extremely irresponsible to think otherwise. That's from David. Thank you for that. Keep them coming. Keep all your thoughts at GBViews, or you can tweet me at GBViews, or why not email me, GBViews at, what is it, GBViews
at gbnews.uk.
Thank you, I've forgotten so many GBGBs. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, nurses prepare for another round of industrial action this evening. That's as one nursing union boss warns the government could face years of strikes if it doesn't change strategy. So do you support the nurses? That's on the way next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
that my father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 23 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before the break, we were discussing immigration. Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. John says, afternoon, Nana. If you think it's bad now, wait till the summer when all the seaside resorts, tourism plunges and they don't generate any money because all the hotels are being taken up. Well, they're actually generating a lot of money, but it's not from us. Oscar says, let the British nationals come back. Jay says, regarding reparations, I don't understand how some people think the living of today should pay the debts of the dead from the past. I couldn't agree more. I just don't see the point. I mean, who are you going to pay? They're dead. All right, so join me now. Make sure you send me all your messages. But next up, and also in the studio with me, Martin Daubney and also Nigel Nelson. They're going head-to-head. And we're discussing the nurses who are walking off the job once again this evening. Members of the RCN will go on strike at 8 o'clock. And the RCN chiefs have warned that the UK could face years of nurses' strikes if government doesn't change its strategy on pay. Pat Cullen has told The Independent government and NHS legal action this week will only serve to drive nurses further away. Unions, including Unison and the GMB, have voted in favour of the government pay offer to end the strikes, whilst Unite and the RCN have voted against it. So let's welcome my panel and let's discuss. I'll start with you, Martin Daubney. What are your thoughts on this?
I think now the nurses' strikes they're beyond the realms of pay and they're into the realms of politics. If they were serious, a 17.5% pay offer is just incredulous. It's just inflation-busting, budget-busting nonsense. And I think they know it. And the fact that 2 unions are voting for the government's deal and the RCN are now isolated will start to play against them. And also, I think the biggest point now is a severe... We need to ask a severe question about what nurses actually stand for. Last week, they were withdrawing critical care from cancer patients. This week, Great Ormond Street... may see the withdrawal of treatment for the sickest children in the most totemic children's hospital in the United Kingdom. If that happens, if children start dying because of politics and because of walkouts, I think the court of public opinion will rapidly turn against nurses. And I think they need to have a long look in the mirror and think, why is it they got into this occupation in the first place? Now, I understand that the government takes the mickey on pay.
With a lot of them, though, because, look, if you look at the politicians, they are earning, £86,000 now. And it's arguable. I'd say nurses are way more valuable than politicians.
Yeah, and I think there's a decent argument for a 5% pay rise with back pay. That's what the government's offering. But 17.5%, 20% is, I think, just in the realms of fantasy. The country can't afford it. And I think the nurses really need to have a long, hard look in the mirror and think, why is it that I'm nursing? Because if children start dying because of pay offers, it's going to be a national scandal.
Because they keep arguing that actually it's not just pay, it's actually conditions, everything else. But the British nurses, on average, they earn about £30,880. But if you compare that to the European average rate, it's around about £36,600. So they are kind of in line with our European partners.
Yeah, it depends on which grade you look at and so on.
But we've taken an average on basic pay.
OK. And just a point about Great Ormond Street Hospital, they're not going to go and strike there now. They've agreed to actually maintain cover at Great Ormond Street.
But they threatened to do so.
They did threaten to do so.
They did.
But they have actually relented from that. And Martin's quite right about the 17.5% pay claim. No, it was not realistic any more than doctors trying to get 35% is realistic.
So why ask for it, though,
just because it's not realistic doesn't mean it's not reasonable. That the argument has been that their pay over the last 20 years has fallen behind. The same with the doctors, that if they were keeping pace with inflation, that's the kind of rise they should have.
But Nigel, just to stop you on that, though, it's very unrealistic to expect your pay to go in line with inflation. They're very fortunate that they can even request that, because if you look at, say, an average IT manager, and I just looked at that over the last sort of 10 years, their pay has gone down about 26% since 2010. So the nurses are actually in a better position than a lot of other professionals. And perhaps do you think that they're being a little bit unrealistic and not understanding the landscape of the other jobs? Because loads of other different industries are falling behind inflation.
I think they were at the original pay claim, but this has now come back down to 5%, which is obviously a lot more realistic. The problem you've got there is that the RCN has rejected that, not the leadership. The leadership recommended it, but the nurses themselves voted against that, which they're entitled to do. You've got Unison, which represents the majority of health workers, and they've accepted it. Then, as you already said, we now have GMB Unite, we have the other unions. Yeah. There could be a solution to this come Tuesday when the NHS Staff Council meets, and the way that would work is the unions all get a weighted vote depending on their membership, and it might then call off the strikes. Question obviously is whether or not the nurses should go on a strike from tonight or not. If you believe in the right to strike, which I do, I think yes they should. Whether those strikes will continue after Tuesday is another matter.
Do you think that perhaps the government needs to start looking at essential workers and actually start looking to remove their right to strike and promise that their pay will maybe go up in line with inflation within reason?
A similar thing happened in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan when the air traffic controllers in America went on strike. And he said, if you don't get back to work on Monday morning, you're fired. And they were like, you can't do that. He said, I can. Because it was a critical service. America was literally grounded. And here we are now, and you're right, they've withdrawn that ridiculous sabre-rattling of threatening to not treat sick children. But nevertheless, they made that threat, Nigel. And I think that's an absolute dereliction of duty. It's cruel. And it pushes this into the realms, for me, not only about pay, but trying to inflict the maximum political capital damage on the Conservative government, because that's what this is about now. It's about left-wing unions trying to make the Tories look like child killers who don't care about the health of the nation, when the real problem is that the NHS is broken and needs a root and branch reform. And what political parties actually got the guts to do that? Now, my fear is, if the Labour Party get in, they're going to be absolutely on the knees to their union barons who bankroll them. So this won't get any better anytime soon. The NHS needs to be reformed, and the Conservative government has got to do something about it. They appear weak, and it's not going anywhere soon.
Well, what would you say to the fact that it does look like it's a concerted effort of unions to try and club together to try and eject the government?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a political thing. That what the unions exist for is to improve the paying conditions of members. That is what they're doing. When it comes down to the kind of strike action you take, there's not much point going on strike. They've had no effect at all. So you have to have strike action that does have an effect. So whether that's the rail workers doing it for Eurovision and the Derby and the FA Cup.
Yeah, but there's a big difference between people being able to get to a race on time and their children or their mothers or their sons or their fathers dying.
I do appreciate that. And I also think that the answer to this ultimately is what you've just said, Martin. The NHS is on its knees. We can no longer run a 21st century health service based on a 1948 model.
And don't forget as well,
it needs reform.
It's not just about pay. I know that NHS junior doctors might say, well, we earn less than barristers, or we earn less than people who work in restaurants. What about the pensions? What about the perks? What about the benefits? All paid for by the taxpayer. And every 1% is going to cost millions and millions and millions of pounds to you and I and every taxpayer. We have a right, too, to say, hang on, now this is pushing things too far.
Yes, I mean, but the point, to go sort of full circle, is where the pay claim is at the moment is affordable. We are talking around about 5%.
But they've rejected that.
No, the nurses have rejected that. We have to see what the NHS Staff Council does on Tuesday, because some unions have accepted it. But the point I'm making there is we're now back into a kind of realistic negotiating position, however you look at it.
Well, the RCN is holding out, and it just makes them, I fear, look militant, unrealistic, political,
greedy, I think.
And greedy, and against the care of patients, which is the formative central plank of being a nurse, surely.
But I've got to say, though, having seen the operation and the way the health service operates, so my son, he had a funny sort of stiff neck the other day and he couldn't move his head properly, and I thought, and that is one of the signs of meningitis, so we got in touch with it, and the whole service kicked in, the 111, which took ages, and then eventually the doctors and eventually the ambulance came to get him, he went to the hospital, and the people couldn't have been nicer. And in my mind, I was thinking, you know what? This is incredible. We're very lucky to have this, but there needs to be a change. And I did ask some of the guys in the ambulance, the ambulance workers, why are people going on strike? And they said it's basically for the safety of the patients. But for me, that doesn't sort of marry off with the fact that they then ask for a huge, unrealistic pay rise, which doesn't work for me. But let's see what people are saying. Colin says it's about time that those on the picket lines were transparent. They should wear armbands if they are union officials, and for those who aren't, they should state what they earned over their previous year. It's fair enough, isn't it? Jeanette says, we already know that the NHS staff don't care about patient safety. During the pandemic, doctors discharged infected people into care homes and refused to admit anyone from a care home. Well, I don't know whether that's truly all.
That was the government policy.
That was not
government
policy. You
the
can't blame them, actually. But I understand that you're upset with that. I would be. We've got some with small boats as well. Listen, keep all your thoughts coming. gbviews@gbnews.uk, or why not tweet me at GBNews. Alan says, I think the nurses are just being greedy. There are a lot of people in the UK who have made a lot less. Diana says, whilst I'd like to see the nurses' salaries double, I don't agree with them striking. And Angie says, I don't support nurses and doctors who put people's lives at risk. These unions who are demanding extortionate pay rises and destroying the economy make me sick. Crikey. Keep your thoughts coming. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, Labour MPs have called for an apology over the UK's historic role in slavery, reparations. But the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, refused to apologise. Was he right?
Nana, thank you very much. It's 3:33. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Some breaking news. A humanitarian truce in Sudan has been extended for 72 hours, starting from midnight tonight. It comes as the Red Cross has sent planes with medical supplies to the port of Sudan. That's following the final evacuation flight carrying British nationals that departed Khartoum late last night. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden said rescue operations ended following a significant decline in the number of British nationals coming forward to flee. Nearly 1,900 people on 21 flights have been evacuated. NHS nurses across the country will walk out from 8 o'clock this evening in a 28-hour strike over pay. 54% of RCN members rejected the government's offer of a 5% pay rise from April. The General Secretary of the RCN, Pat Cullen, has said nurses have worked tirelessly with NHS England to make sure their strike is safe for patients. Great Ormond Street Hospital is among organisations where nurses have agreed to keep limited staff on after voicing serious concerns about patient safety during the walkout. NHS England is urging the public to use the health service wisely and says emergency and urgent care would remain the priority. 5 people, including an 8-year-old child, have been killed in a shooting at a home in Texas. Officials from the San Jacinto County Sheriff's Office attended the scene after they received a call about harassment. Several victims had been shot by the time police arrived. The suspect is armed and still on the run. And the British Army has begun rehearsals for the coronation of King Charles. Soldiers from all divisions of the armed forces have gathered at training areas across South London to prepare for the biggest ceremonial event of their lives. They've flown home from operational duties or training exercises from as far as Cyprus, Iraq, Kenya and Estonia to represent their regiments and corps at the event. TV, online, DAB Plus radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
It's fast approaching, 36 minutes after 3 o'clock. Loads more still to come. At 4, I'll be giving you my take on whether you should use a jab to fight the flab. But first, we'll be discussing whether or not the UK should pay reparations for its involvement in the slave trade. You won't want to miss that one.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you just joined me, where have you been? This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. What were we discussing earlier? Well, we were talking about... what were we talking about earlier? I've totally forgotten. Where am I?
Small boats,
with
Sudan.
strikes last
We've got
time.
loads of stuff. Yeah, no, we were talking about strikes, weren't we? Sorry, it's Martin Daubney joining me and also Nigel Nelson. Right, so Colin says, do we live in a democracy? Polling says that we want to control our borders. Really? Is that what you're saying? Do we live in a dog? So, this is about the borders of small boats. So why should we take any notice from those arguing for it? James says when it comes to nurses, it's not the pay, it's the working conditions. Yeah, you say that, but then they ask for a ridiculous amount. What was it, 17%? The doctors asked for 35. I mean, come on. The government wants one nurse to do two nurses' jobs. Well, I agree with you, they should be paid more, but I think it is about the pay. Terry says, I do not support strike action. I think it's terrible to hold sick people to ransom. A lot of nurses left to work for private testing companies since COVID, as well as doctors. Maybe the answer is actually just to privatise the thing, because in other countries that we keep getting compared to, they're all privatised. Right, well, moving on, though, the Prime Minister has refused to apologise for the UK's historical role in slavery and colonialism, rejecting a call for pay and reparations. Labour MP Bell Ribeiro-Addy challenged Rishi Sunak at Prime Minister's questions this week, calling for a commitment to reparatory justice. Mr Sunak said trying to unpick our history is not the right way forward. Let's welcome again to my panel then presenter and contributor Martin Daubney and GB News political commentator Nigel Nelson. I'm going to start with you, Martin, on this one, because reparations, what's your view on them?
Well, Rishi Sunak was correct to say we shouldn't go down that route. Anybody who says that including the Labour Party MP in question, shouldn't be trusted to run a church tombola, let alone the economy. The figures in question are eye-watering. Britain actually paid reparations of £20 million back in 1807. That equates to about £300 billion in today's money. It took until 2015 to pay off that debt because that money had to be borrowed. So the basics of this are, if we go down the route of paying money to foreign countries, now for the misdemeanors of the past, every living taxpayer alive today has to pay the bill. How many of those taxpayers had any direct involvement in slavery at all? I would say an infinitesimally small amount. Yet they would have to stump up to people who weren't directly affected themselves. When the Californians looked at this, just for one state in America, they estimated it would be $800 billion for reparations. The figures in Britain would be into the trillions. Now we're £2 trillion in debt already. If we doubled our national debt or more, we would head towards hyperinflation, recession, and we would bankrupt the nation. It's madness and it needs to stop. Nigel, I have a question for you. We have Labour MPs saying this repeatedly. They're virtue signalling from the backbenchers, but the country needs to know, is the Labour Party serious about going down this route? Because if they are, we need to be told. And if they are, it's going to bankrupt the country.
Yeah, and it is not official Labour Party policy. So Labour MPs may well be calling for something like this. That's a matter for individual MPs. It certainly isn't official policy to go and do this. And I think, like you, Rishi Sunak was absolutely right with what he said in Prime Minister's questions, that we shouldn't apologise, we shouldn't pay reparations. I think we should regret what happened with slavery. We should certainly condemn it, but this was something that happened in a different age with different values and different standards. And if we keep going backwards and backwards, we're going to start apologising for Henry VIII burning Catholics and his daughter
if we go
burning
all the way
Protestants.
back, if we all go all the way back, we'll all end up in Africa, which is where we're all from. Because mankind was from Africa, so I don't know who we're supposed to be asking the money for. I think it's absolutely ridiculous, actually, this whole reparations. I think it's pure hypocrisy. Laura Trevelyan had this whole thing where she went back to Grenada and said, oh, it's terrible, my family made a fortune, look at me, I'm so wealthy, but you guys, it's awful that now a lot of you are impoverished. We're going to club together and give you 100 grand. Hang on a minute, there's like over 100,000 people, if there is more than that.
But she's a private citizen. I mean, if she would have spent her money on that, that's her business.
No, but that's
this is taxpayers'
money. Hold on. It's the principle of it. It's the principle of it. And then it turns out that the Guardian, who actually wrote this thing in, had their own links to slavery. And actually, whilst we're at it, my iPhone, your iPhone, this dress, everything has a link to slavery. So it is an absolute nonsense. Any part of it, any consideration of paying some ghost or somebody somewhere who died as a result of slavery is pointless, because we are all partaking in it now.
Yeah, but I do think politically we need clarity. Rishi Sunak gave us clarity. No, we're not going down this route. But there are so many Labour Party MPs rattling the sabre on this topic. Keir Starmer, once again, needs to get off that fence and tell the nation, no, we're not going down this route. But he won't tell us what a woman is. We don't know where he stands on Brexit. You can't sit on the fence forever.
I think we do know where. I mean, working through those things, he does know where we stand on Brexit.
Oh, really?
Well,
where does he stand? Because I'm not sure, because he wanted us to come back.
For 3 years.
We will now make the best of Brexit. That Brexit is irreversible, and he's quite right about that. Yes, he was a Remainer. I was a Remainer. I don't think there's any way that we can go back on Brexit now.
Would you like to, if there was a possibility that we could do that? Would you like to go back?
No, I think it would actually be. It was too divisive the first time round. It would be divisive the second time round. The important thing is to make the best of it. If the vote happened again, I would vote Remain, but I still. But we're not in, so I can't vote Remain, and I wouldn't vote to go back in again.
What about a vote on membership of the European, the ECHR? Because then that's where we're heading. We talked about small boats earlier.
Yeah, we're obviously in a different area there with the European Court of Human Rights. No, we shouldn't leave it, and this comes back to our situation with immigration. What we have to do as a nation, as part of the civilised world, is to respect international international law. And if we
international law is being weaponised against British law, for example...
We don't like this particular law.
Keir Starmer grounding flights of criminals and murderers about to be deported to Jamaica. The Labour Diane Abbott signing up to a letter preventing the deportation. Left-wing lawyers preventing Rwandan flights. This will go on and on and on. And I say to you again, Nigel, it's about clarity. You know, we need clarity on this. I think we're heading towards another referendum.
Labour is against Rwanda flights and will use the 120 million that we're spending on it to fund a new unit in the National Crime Agency to try and tackle people smugglers. I'm against the Rwanda flights. I think I don't think it's going to work, and secondly, it's the wrong thing to do. Now, if the European Court turns around and says the same thing, we should respect that. Just because we don't like a judge, well, because we are a member of the international community.
And that's what I'm saying. So if time and time again Brexit Groundhog Day re-emerges in the Lords, in ECHR, denying the will of the people to deport people who break the law and come here against the will of the people, throwing their passports in the channel. Right,
the will of President Putin was to invade Ukraine. We don't think that was legal under international law.
That's hard to decide.
On the basis of that.
How have we come to this from reparations? Let's get back to reparations.
Yeah, good idea.
Sorry, we went completely off at a tangent.
It was fine. It was very interesting and all that. But so let's come back to reparations. You know what it is? Because we actually, I think we all agree that reparations are a ludicrous idea. And I'm just glad that Rishi Sunak has called it out. But the problem is that Sir Keir Starmer is so on the fence, he's got splinters. I mean, you know, the man doesn't seem to be able to make a decision and then sort of goes onto the side that is the popular side once everybody's decided what side that is.
His decisions.
No, it's not. He doesn't make a decision. He never makes a decision until the decision is made. He works out which one is the most popular and then he jumps on the bandwagon. That's all he does.
I'm not sure that actually stopping Rwanda is necessarily popular. I
think a lot of people, maybe not to you in your ivory towers, but I think a lot of people in the British public would like to see something happen and they're glad that something is being said. Rather than the Labour Party, what are they saying? What are they going to do? They're going to get some force, they're going to spend a load of money and get some international force to stop the traffickers. In the meantime, we've got a problem.
And also to try and get back what we did lose over Brexit, where there is a connection, which is the only connection, which is to get the returns agreements with European countries so we can send people back who've already made an application in an EU country before crossing the channel to get here.
But on reparations, I think that the red wall would greatly appreciate some clarity from the Labour Party. Just come out and say, if Keir Starmer says we need to analyse and accept responsibility for our past, but we are not entertaining the notion of reparations or payments for slavery crimes, then that would get him a lot of votes in the red wall. Just come out and say it. Be honest.
Because members of the Labour Party, like this Ribeiro Addy, is calling for reparations.
Well, if you'd like to come on, we can ask him, and I'm sure that's what he would say.
Well, he won't come on, will he? Keir Starmer doesn't want to be challenged by anybody who thinks anything different.
Well, I think he should come on to GBNews.
I think he should come on to GBNews. I watched him one time and he goes, I'll take a question from you, Beth Rigby, and this one. And we agreed 3 questions, one from Sly News, one from BBC, and another one from somebody else who was there. But no, he wouldn't talk to us. Well, listen, we love balance in this here on GBNews. So Keir Starmer, you are welcome to come on board. We'd love to hear your policies because you have a potential audience here who would be interested in what you have to say, as long as you don't sit on the fence. Right, so there we go. What do you think at home? Do you think that's done it? Do you think he'll come on after that?
Yeah, we should do.
I'd love to see it. Right, moving on to the latest modernisation, I asked so nicely, of the Coronation. It's been revealed, instead of the homage of the peers, where hereditary lords would pledge to the monarch, where there'll now be a homage of the people, which means that we'll all be asked to pledge allegiance to the king out loud. But for a king trying to modernise the royal family, it's starting off with a public proclamation the right way forward. And with most young people already apparently against having a monarchy, will this just put people off even more? Let's see what Martin Daubrey and also Nigel Nelson think of that. I'm going to start with you, Nigel. Are you going to be paying homage out loud?
Yeah, I'm quite relaxed about this. I think that it is a good idea. And I think that the important thing about the king, I see him more as our head of state, and why it is important to have a non-political head of state. The one thing that the king does is give our constitution a certain stability. So, for instance, that you've got crown servants who are the armed forces, the intelligence services, coast guards, a variety of other people who are responsible for the security of the country, they owe their allegiance to the king, not to the government of the day. It's unlikely we'd have a military coup in this country, but if we did, the point is that the army would be on the side of the king, not necessarily some Tim Pock dictator who was trying to do it.
That's interesting.
So my allegiance to the king is fine, and I'm happy to proclaim it out loud.
Martin, what about you?
So I'm pro-monarchy. I get very angry about newspapers like The Guardian, who had their own problems with slavery, throwing everything at the moment at King Charles in terms of his slave pass, abolished the monarchy. However, I disagree with you. I think King Charles is political. And he is political along lines, especially of climate change, which is pure politics.
But don't you think climate change is actually a global issue? Whilst I hear you, it is a global proposition. This is all that the world needs to start looking about how they're dealing with it. So whilst it might be political, it is a real overall overview.
And if he was political, it was actually as Prince of Wales, not as king.
Yeah, but
in fairness, since he's been king, he's not actually done anything political.
But this is the guy who's Greta Thunberg in a tweed suit. He's been campaigning for on climate change. Yes, he does. He's been campaigning on it for years, and he's at COP26 on his private jet, paid for by taxpayer, just like Jeff Bezos, just like Tony Blair, just like all the rest of them. And I think for me, this belief system is a luxury belief system which hammers and annihilates the working classes the hardest, who end up paying more for their cars, for their shopping, for everything, for their heating. And that all comes from Britain's self-flagellation around net zero, and the king endorses that. And net zero is politics. It's pure politics.
Well, listen, but that is the way about achieving a nice, clean environment. The decision as to how to achieve it is the policy, and the king is not involved in that. So I respect the idea that he is overseeing and looking at it, but he won't get involved in the minutiae.
Well, he's on the same platform as Joe Biden. He's on the same platform
I don't like
as world leaders. Yeah. So I'm afraid, for me, King Charles is a political king, and that's.
Will you be pledging allegiance to the whole thing?
I'm going to watch it. I'm going to enjoy it. I'll raise a glass to him, and I'll say good luck to you, mate. And I will welcome Camilla as Queen. But as far as taking the knee to Charles, it's not for me. And actually, Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Wokery, endorsing this puts me off even more. Because actually the church now is also the church of climate change, the church of LGBTQ issues. And I think the whole thing now is imbibed in identity politics and net zero. And for me, it's a turn-off.
Well, do you know what? I think you're thinking too deeply on this one. Because this is, for me, I'm a real royalist, so I love it all. I like to get involved in it. I'll be doing it out loud. And because I'll be at Buckingham Palace, but if I had my kids with me, I'd have them going, come on, everybody, and we'd be having some fun. So to me, this is more a unity and a really lovely celebration. It's not you have to do it, but if you want to, it makes you feel inclusive. So I'm happy to do that. I don't see it that way as if you were to compare the two, the taking the knee, I think taking the knee is a fad, and it's sort of like a sort of virtue signal, whereas this is just your own sort of personal feeling about your own inside feeling about the monarchy and the country.
I just know I tremendously and desperately miss Queen Elizabeth. You know, I really mourn for her still. And I just think she was perhaps the last great monarch of my lifetime, although I will be down there waving flags with my kids. I will.
Give Charles a chance, you never know, he might.
Yeah, I'll be happily proven wrong.
What about the national anthem then? Do you sing that?
I do, yeah.
So that's kind of like their sort of version of it for the coronation, isn't it?
Well, I'll still get it wrong after a couple of beers and say, God save the Queen, I must confess.
Yeah, no, I quite like all that. Listen, what are you going to be doing at home? Let us know. I'd love to hear what you're going to be doing. Hopefully you'll also be watching GB News and finding out what we're doing, because Nigel, not Nigel Nelson, but Nigel Farage will be there live, bringing the coronation to you, and I'll be at Buckingham Palace also doing the honours, and you'll be joining me for my show between 2 and 4. Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Let's see. Callan says, I will not be swearing allegiance. It's all very old-fashioned. Yeah, it is, but the whole thing is old-fashioned. The whole coronation thing is like from the 50s.
It's actually quite new-fashioned. It's a new idea.
This is the idea of, you know, jazzing it up a bit and involving the public. Paul says, myself and many veterans have already sworn allegiance to King Charles, but will also swear allegiance on the day of the coronation as well. And he says it's great to swear allegiance. However, you have to mean it, not just when it suits. Yeah, that's true, isn't it? You've got to swear allegiance. So what will you be doing, Martin? Are you with GB News for the coronation, or
No, because it's Coronation Saturday, my regular Saturday show. I've got a weekend off, so I'm going to be painting my patio and my fence and having a nice DIY week, enjoying the sun. But I will get involved in the pomp ceremony. I'm a grizzled cynic, but when it comes to it, I always wave my flags and get involved. I do.
You probably send like a drunken tweet, me with a little picture. And Nigel, what about you? What are you up to?
I shall be watching it at home unless I get called in here.
Well, you better be called in here, Nigel. Yeah, you'll be called in here, and that's how it goes. Well, listen, don't forget you can stay tuned to me for the next hour. I've got so much more to come, also including my monologue, where I'll be discussing loads of stuff. Let's have a quick look at any more emails of what people have been saying. Let's have a quick look to see what you've been saying. All right. Go on, say something, boys. Don't leave me.
What they're saying?
Don't leave me here.
They're saying fantastic show, Nana. It looks a bit hot in the studio today, because it is.
Yes.
Even you're feeling the heat today.
Even I'm feeling it. That's why I'm losing myself. Listen, stay tuned. Thanks more. My monologue is on the way in the next hour.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster, she's only over it, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Hi there, it is 4 o'clock. Good afternoon to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Some breaking news in the last few minutes. The government is planning an extra evacuation flight from Sudan tomorrow for British nationals trying to leave the country. It will take off from Port Sudan in the east of the country, where humanitarian aid has been arriving today. Meanwhile, a humanitarian truce in Sudan has been extended for 72 hours from midnight tonight. That's according to the RSF paramilitary group. The Sudanese army has yet to confirm that news. It has been broken, though, the current ceasefire, with airstrikes and fighting in the capital. Currently, 2,122 people have been evacuated to the UK on 21 RAF flights. More on that as soon as we get it here at GB News. Now, NHS nurses across the country will walk out from 8 o'clock this evening in a 28-hour strike over pay. In a ballot earlier this month, 54% of RCN members rejected the government's offer of a 5% pay rise from April. Great Ormond Street Hospital is among the organisations where nurses have agreed to keep limited staff on after voicing serious concerns about patient safety during the walkout. NHS England is urging the public to use the health service wisely. It says emergency and urgent care will remain a priority. The head of global projects at Young Voices UK, Jason Reid, told GB News the nurses' strike is the wrong thing to do.
Just hate to think of all those patients and all those families who will suffer directly as a result of what the RCN are doing. If they really were concerned about patient safety, I don't think that they would be doing this. I don't think you could have a clear conscience to walk out if you're an intensive care nurse or a cancer nurse and say that it was patient safety that was motivating you. Pretty clearly, they just want to squeeze a few extra pounds out of the government, our money, of course, that we're paying through taxes. And so it's just not a situation that the government should give into and set a precedent for future strikes, that this is an OK thing to do.
However, assistant editor at Prospect magazine, Emily Crawford, says nurses are putting patients' lives at risk due to being overworked.
If nurses have been so overworked and understaffed for the past few years, that in itself has been a risk to patient safety anyway. Last year there were 40,000 full-time nurses vacancies in England. If we've got massive gaps like that, I think patient safety has already been at risk for a while.
The Prime Minister has criticised selfish saboteurs who force traffic to go slow. Rishi Sunak told The Sun on Sunday he wants to put a stop to those who use this tactic. Ministers would like police to be able to stop slow walkers, but Labour says the government is merely chasing headlines. It comes as ministers plan to push through measures to widen the legal definition of serious disruption to enable officers to prevent activists interfering with traffic. 5 people, including an 8-year-old child, have been killed in a shooting at a home in Texas. Officials from the San Jacinto County Sheriff's Office attended the scene after receiving a call about harassment. Several victims had been shot by the time police arrived. The suspect is armed and remains at large. The British Army has begun rehearsals for the coronation of King Charles. Soldiers from all divisions of the armed forces have gathered at training areas across South London to prepare for the biggest ceremonial event of their lives. Soldiers have flown home from operational duties or training exercises from as far afield as Cyprus, Iraq, Kenya and Estonia to represent their regiments at the event. Representatives from the nation's faith communities will also play an active role in the coronation. For the first time in history, when King Charles is crowned, leaders from Jewish, Hindu, Sikh, Muslim and Buddhist groups will deliver a greeting to the King in unison. The Archbishop of Canterbury says the service will be foremost an act of Christian worship, but new elements will reflect the diversity of modern society. And the Stone of Destiny has been welcomed to England in a special ceremony ahead of the event. It dates back to the 12th century and is normally on display at Edinburgh Castle. It will sit under the King's throne next week and has been used in coronations for nearly 1,000 years. This is GB News. More as it happens, but now let's get back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is a GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now listen, underneath this is a big fat black mama waiting to get out. The only reason she hasn't is willpower. But now, where there is no will, there's a way, a fat jab. A little while ago, I wrote about how being fat is your own fault, and let's face it, in nearly all cases it is. People are too busy stuffing food in their gobs, even when given a diagnosis of self-inflicted diabetes type 2, to make the effort to change their lifestyle and put in the work required to maintain a healthy body weight. I used to be a trainer, and one client couldn't work out why she was so overweight. She claimed that alongside her 3 healthy meals, she only drank tea, so I made her write down everything that she ate for a week. And it was only when I pointed out that in each one of her 8 daily cups, she was actually putting 7 teaspoons of sugar in, that the problem became clear. But for those of us that can't be bothered, you'll be pleased to know that a revolution is underway in the form of drugs. Drugs that can get rid of the fat. Drugs that can get rid of the fat and save many from the complications and the strain on the NHS's purse strings that come with being obese. Rather than relying solely on diet, exercise and willpower to reduce fat, these new drugs target digestive and chemical pathways that underline obesity, suppressing appetite and stopping cravings. Basically, the body goes into starvation mode, storing fat and slowing down metabolism when you go on a diet. And Dr. Louis Aron, director of the Comprehensive Weight Control Centre at Cornell Medicine, said this about it. There are a number of hormones that respond to reduced calorie intake. The obesity medications help overcome a biological mechanism that kicks in when people diet, triggering a coordinated effort by the body to prevent weight loss. Now, apparently, with diet and exercise alone, research shows that about 1/3 of people will lose 5% or more of their body weight. But with these drugs, this is considerably more. In trials, one brand showed up to 15% of body weight lost in just 16 months. Dr. Amy Rothberg at the University of Michigan said this: they've entirely changed the landscape. What is this drug called, I hear you cry? I can feel you shouting at me through the screen. I can feel Danny's eyes peering at me like lasers. Now, listen, I'm all for medical interventions when all else has failed, but these new drugs may well have a list of complications of their own and lead to even fatter and lazier people. Worse still, they are now prescribing these things to children as young as 12. Really? How about teaching the kids how to eat healthier rather than medicate them at such a young age? Presumably, like any good diet, once you come off these drugs, you pile on the pounds. Well, it's not easy for those of us that are slim, but the truth is we work extremely hard to keep a good weight, both in what we eat and what we do. So I kind of feel a bit at odds with these new slimming drugs that will come onto the market. Being a healthy weight is about mindset and conditioning, which I don't believe can be bypassed in the long term. And whilst I applaud the ingenuity of modern medicine, nothing comes without side effects. To me, they sound a little bit too good to be true. Time will tell. But the question is, would you take a jab to fight the flab? Oh, I'm here, I'm back again. How about that? I was going to have a nice little drink. Right, now, before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should you swear allegiance to the King? The Archbishop of Canterbury has called on the public to pledge allegiance to the King during Saturday's much anticipated coronation. But is this the right way forward for a king who wants to modernise the monarchy? Then at 4:50, it's Worldview. I'll be joined by political commentator Danny Armstrong and the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge, to discuss the top stories from around the globe. On the menu, US President Joe Biden will send his wife to the King's coronation in his place after declining his invitation a few weeks ago. Then stay tuned at 5 o'clock in this week's Outside. I'll be speaking to a transgender man who regrets his decision to change sex. At age of 42, we spoke to Scott Nugent, who was there in the States. He's come to the UK to speak to us personally. Scott Nugent has suffered from numerous medical complications since his transition and has advocated against it. He'll be here live in the studio to give us his story. You will not want to miss that. That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel. Joining me today, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Right, so, you know, I'm going to come to you first, isn't it, Danny? Danny,
Well,
would you take the jab to fight the flab?
Now I know why you've waited till Sunday for this story. It's been going around for the last couple of days. Yeah, I think I would. I'd like to. It's a shortcut. Now,
we like you as you are. We love you.
Yeah, but you would like me. It's my personality. I hope you like, rather than my excess fat.
But that's all part of it.
She loves being able to have a go at it.
Well, that's it.
How would she go?
What am I going to do for jokes?
I would be happy. So, I think my wife Danielle. I did discuss should I have this fat jab, and my wife Danielle is worried about the side effects. Now, if you wanted to use me as a case study, so long as I cleared it with my missus that she wasn't worried, I'd be more than happy to do that. When I got married, I'm over 21 stone, but I'm 6'4" for the context of people who are listening on the radio.
He's not short and fat. He's tall and fat.
Tall and fat.
He's big.
Tall and fat. No, I'm fat.
He's big and cuddly.
I'm fat.
Yes,
well, Andy's cuddly, but
I'm fat, and that's a big mistake that people can make, being overly kind to fat people like me.
Yeah, just be honest.
Yeah, be honest. Instead of saying, no, you're just big bones. Yes, I'm fat.
There's no such thing as big bones. There are no fat skeletons.
I was 5 stone lighter in a boxing ring about 10 years ago. I used to do a bit of boxing.
Really?
Yeah. When I got married, I was 3 stone lighter. And
Sorry, can I interrupt? 5 stone lighter when you were boxing?
Yes.
And because you will have translated fat into muscle, which is heavier. So that's a lot of weight loss.
So I'm 5 stone, basically. Yeah, but I've always been... I've always yo-yoed with my weight.
There's a lot of muscle loss, Christine. There's a lot of muscle loss.
Anyway, listen, which of you two wants the right hook first?
Nana.
I've still got it. I've still got it. So I have yo-yoed, and I'm all for one for medical shortcuts. I really am. If there's a cheat way to lose weight, I'm up for it.
Really?
Well, why not?
Danny, your skin won't catch up and you'll be like one of those turkeys.
I don't think I have
like
that excess skin. I'm not like 58 stone. You need a cherry picker to get me out of bed.
No, but if you do it slowly, then you don't get the excess skin because your body has a time to tighten and catch up. That might be too quick for you, so you're wiser to do it slowly.
I don't know. I go back to my earlier point. I don't think I'm overly that fat, like a cherry picker sized guy. When when they lose a hell of a lot of weight and they've just got like turkey skin, as you said. So I disagree with you on that. But maybe we'll find out.
If we discover that, you can always have an operation to tuck it to.
Look, please, for the benefit of those listening on radio, I am not 68 stone. I mean, you're making me out to be like one of the world's largest, fattest men.
No, we're not saying that. You're certainly
no, but the excess skin thing.
Yeah,
because,
no, I wouldn't. I don't think
because I was fat before I lost weight. Did boxing. I've been fat before. I've been over 20 stone before,
really?
And I don't have excess skin.
I don't think you. Looking at you, as it were, not that I have seen you without your clothes on, but looking at you, seriously, I don't.
Nana will get jealous now. You're on thin ice.
Hardly.
You are.
Well, you better not be. You go straight through.
Oh, stop it, you. Look, I think that's great. Danny has put himself forward. So anybody out there who's got this jab, here is a willing guinea pig.
What do you have to say, pig?
She did really. You can't win, can you? But I do not like the idea, to go back to where we started, of children having this jab. I really don't.
12 years
any
old.
more than children should have had the COVID jab. We don't know the full implications, and I think it would be quite wrong for children to have it. But we do have a mega problem. I mean, in 1950, 1% of us were obese.
You know what that is, though? Do you know what that is?
Well, yes, but it was post-war. People had had rationing, they hadn't had so much to eat, they didn't have all these junk foods.
No processed
People
food.
used to cook from fresh. I mean, my mother cooked from fresh every single day, every single meal. There was bird's custard powder, if you count that. But, I mean, there were no takeaways, there were
no microwaves.
No, nothing like that. And nowadays, far too much of people's diet is this processed stuff. It's apparently something called SAD, which is the Standard American Diet. And we have got it from them. And if you look over to America, they have got far more obese people than we have. And it's coming over here. And people just don't think what they eat. It's crisps, it's chips, it's burgers, it's cheap.
Well, there was a fabulous article.
And it doesn't fill you up, it doesn't keep you going. So no wonder people are getting... And I'll tell you what worries me. I think it's 85%, but I stand corrected if anybody knows the exact figure. 85% of fat children have fat parents. So, in other words, they learn literally when they're toddlers.
Well, I think
parents feed them the wrong.
To me, it's almost like a form of child abuse in a sense, because you are giving these children very bad food, giving them very bad dietary sort of habits, and then unfortunately they will become fat, and then they become a burden on the NHS because it costs a fortune, and then they become sick. And I think it's important that the parents understand that they need to
It's awful parenting.
It's terrible.
Awful
It's
parenting.
terrible. What about you, though? Would you say that to your parents? I mean, they you know, are your parents overweight? Or
No, they weren't overweight. No, but I've never been as fat as the sort of portrayals as we're describing when you come to children. I think it is bad parenting, and I think, but there'll be parents listening to us and watching us right now with overweight kids, and they'll feel desperately.
Yeah.
They'll be desperate. They'll be at their wits' end about how to help that kid. And also, if you think about it, just Christine, just for a second. Yeah. Look, I'm a middle-aged fat man. Now, if I'm not going to do something about it myself, then I can't really blame parents and call them bad parents when they're overweight, I'm overweight, we're all on that same side of it.
We also need to look at the manufacturers as well. And I'm not saying, because, you know, you can't force people to eat food. If you buy a load of food and eat it, it's your own fault. But what's in the food and how they're processing the food and the additives and chemicals that they're putting in the food that shouldn't actually be going in our bodies, I think is actually changing our physiology and actually affecting our metabolism. I think there's a really important thing. So whilst I think that if you're fat, it is your own fault because you've eaten too much, but there is the other aspect that the manufacturers need to start concentrating on what they're putting in the food.
But they deliberately put in these substances which make it addictive. They absolutely do. But I don't think a lot of parents, they're not doing it deliberately. I'm afraid it's ignorance. They simply don't understand the basic science behind food. And I think it was Lee Anderson who got in tremendous trouble by saying that people who go to food banks, perhaps they should learn to cook.
Yeah.
And then they might be able to eat more cheaply. But there was a guy on GB News the other day, I can't remember whose programme, called Steve Miller. Now, I know Steve
Miller, he's on later.
Is he on later? Well, Steve Miller is great, and he has really down-to-earth, sensible advice to people, and he's a no-nonsense. He doesn't pull his punches. And his phrase that he came up with, which stuck in, was, it's mind over platter. And you should...
I do agree with that. I do agree.
Our plates are twice the size.
I've got a massive plate.
But people's dinner plates used to be sort of that size. Yeah, but out here now.
But I've seen people with small plates that fill them, and they're small plates. My plates are the biggest plates you've ever seen. I can't even find the size of plate that I eat from now, and I'm not fat.
No, but Nana, you eat. I suspect that you
work out
probably
a lot.
eat. I work out. I do heat yoga.
Nana and I are great swimmers. I go swimming. We go swim, not in the same pool, before the rumours start.
But I do think this is a fallacy that some people fall into. They think that, if I just run for the bus, that'll get rid of the Mars bar. No, it won't. What counts is what you put in, not what you put out.
Do you know, I saw a really overweight woman in the fast lane at the Warwickshire Golf and Country Club. And I can't believe she just...
You mean in the swimming lane, not the golf lane?
Sorry, no, in the fast lane of the swimming. They got a pool, and then they got the slow lane, then they got... And I tell you what, she was huge, humongous. Think of me as an older woman, but even bigger. And she was relentless. She didn't stop. And I thought, wow, what a set of lungs on that woman. But she was massive. And I thought, you are very fit for a huge woman.
Yeah. But it's what you eat that is the key, not what you expend in calories.
Well, no,
That's important.
It is a bit of both, but literally they say about 80% of it is what you eat. But the problem is that people are eating a lot, and that is the reason that people are overweight. It's as simple as that. But I think there's a duty of care to a lot of these manufacturers who are giving putting all these chemicals in this processed food, because a lot of it, I think, is toxic. I think a lot of it's poisonous. I eat mostly fruit, vegetables. I try to eat as little processed stuff as possible. And when I do eat the processed food, I start getting really bad heartburn.
It's not
very bad heartburn.
It's not a duty of care. They have a duty for profit. I went to a party yesterday, and it started at 4:30. It was kind of bubbles, tea, etc. And the spread was amazing. And I have never eaten so much ridiculous food. You know, little meringue, fruity things, great big chunky chocolate, this, that, and the other, and a wonderful slice. And I just stuffed myself silly because for me it's forbidden fruit. And you're right, people work hard not to be fat. I work incredibly hard not to be bigger than I am.
So in summary, how would you two feel about if I was to start taking this jab? As friends and colleagues, only weekend colleagues, etc.
Let me be honest, I really like you as you are. I like Danny as he is. Otherwise, what am I going to do for jokes?
But that's the worst thing to say to somebody.
I do like him as he is.
It is the worst thing to say.
But that's all I know.
A 2 stone lighter, you'd still like me.
Yeah.
Of course.
As long as you don't go too skinny.
No, I wouldn't go back to my boxing weight. Anyway.
The only problem with it, though, is I think there could be the issue that you could find that if you stop taking this thing, then you might find that you go back on even faster, which is often...
But I think it undermines people's will, and Danny's clearly got a will to lose weight, and it undermines their will if you say, oh, but we love you as you are, and, you know, you wouldn't be...
No, it doesn't, because sometimes if you push people, then it turns the other way, so it just depends what the person wants to do. It's down to them. Right, you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. What do you think? Would you take the jab? I'd love to hear your thoughts. On the way, though, at 5 o'clock, a very, very special guest coming to the studio from the United States. I'll be speaking to a transgender man who regrets his decision to change sex at the age of 42. Scott Nugent has suffered from numerous medical complications since his transition and has also advocated against it. That's coming up. Do not go anywhere for that one. But before that, it is our Great British Debate, and I'm asking, should we swear allegiance to the King? The Archbishop of Canterbury has called on the public to swear allegiance to the King during the much-anticipated coronation next Saturday. But will you make the pledge? Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. I've got a poll out right now asking that very question. Should we swear allegiance to the King? Cast your vote now. Back after the weather.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Capacity, but what we should have is
£8 to get that car running perfectly.
For 24 minutes actually after 4 o'clock. Welcome aboard. If you just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Don't forget you can also download the GB News app for free. Now, before the break, we were discussing fighting the flab with the jab. Let's see what you've been saying. Would you take the jab? Reese says, I would take the jab, flab, in an instant. Pauline says, once again, the drug companies are on the prowl for more money. Richard said, if this jab is real, then science really has gone too far. Wow, I thought you'd be totally in support of it. I think it's scary because I worry that once you stop, a bit like a diet, the fat will come piling on. But it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should we swear allegiance to the King? The Archbishop of Canterbury has called upon the public to pledge allegiance to the King during the much-anticipated coronation next Saturday. During the order of service, those in the Abbey and around the world will be asked to say, "All, I swear that I will pay tribute, pay allegiance, true allegiance to your Majesty and to your heirs and successors according to law, so help me God." That's it. But this will be the first time that members of the public will be included in the ceremony. But for a king trying to modernise the royal family, is starting off with a public proclamation the right way forward? Should the coronation be more about the celebration of the UK rather than the individual? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, would you swear allegiance to the King? Right, let's see. Joining me now is Michael Cole. He's a former royal correspondent. Narinder Kaur, broadcaster and social commentator. Nigel Nelson, GB News political commentator. And Edwina Currie, former Conservative MP. I'm going to start with you, Michael Cole. What do you think? Swearing allegiance to the King. Are you going to be doing it?
Yes, I think I will, although I'll be working for you, so it may be a little bit difficult at that particular moment. But certainly my heart is with him, because I think what we've got to recognise here is that over the centuries, the ritual of the coronation has changed. Witness the fact that the King has cut it down from 3 hours when his mother was crowned to 2 hours now. And what he's clearly trying to do is make it as inclusive and as ecumenical as possible. Now, the sneering classes, the smart metropolitan people may not wish to do that, but this country is based upon Judeo-Christianity and its morality, the 10 Commandments and all that. That actually keeps us probably in check. We don't go around murdering, raping and robbing each other, or if we do, we face the penalty of the law. That's the great beauty of this country, a constitutional monarchy with a king or a queen at the head of it, who is the best defense we have against extremism and dictatorship. Now, the King, it may not be you, it may not be you, but it may be your Aunt Bertha at home or people sitting quietly in their house. They may actually give a little bit of thanks to this country that's always being slagged off by all and sundry, but everybody seems to want to come here. That we do have this unique arrangement, which has many contradictions in it, but seems to work extremely well. Now, if you don't want to take an oath, there's no compunction, there's no penalty. It's a matter of private decision. And that's the way it should.
Let me ask Narinder Kaur. Narinder, will you be swearing allegiance?
No, I will not be swearing allegiance to a man who's just become king through historical chance and who represents actually a pyramid of entitlement and whose wealth has been built on the backs of other people. I think it's a ridiculous and tone-deaf request. It has no place in democracy, and anyone who does swear their allegiance has to have a really good long hard think about themselves, because, I mean, what other medieval traditions should we bring back? It's absolutely ridiculous. It's pushing the envelope, and I don't think it's going to unify the country. I think actually it's going to divide the country, and it smacks of desperation. I mean, how desperate are they, or worried about how unpopular this king actually is?
Well, do you not think it's more inclusive? Well, listen, I need to have a word with myself, Narinder, because I am going to swear allegiance to the king, and I'm going to have fun with it. Edwina Currie.
Well, it's something new, Nana. It wasn't in the last coronation. This has been introduced for the first time, the idea that everybody should do this who's listening in or watching in. And I'm very much in two minds about it. I'm perfectly happy for the king to swear that he's going to be the servant of all of us. That's fine. I'm happy with that. And apparently he's going to say that several times. The idea that we are then his servants strikes me as being, well, a bit sort of odd, really. I have taken a similar oath in the past. The oath that you take when you swear in and you sign in as a member of parliament is very, very similar. And that's one of the reasons why Irish Republicans are not able to take their seats, even if they won seats in Northern Ireland. They don't take it, and they never have, and they don't serve in the House of Commons. They claim all the allowances, but they don't do the swearing. But for myself, no, I'm sorry, the king's got to prove himself. And my own feeling is that Camilla, who is a woman of tremendous good sense, should really have threatened him with a rolling pin or something like that and said to him, Charles, don't be ridiculous. We are too old. I'm 75. There's no way I can sit through 2 hours in all of this palaver in the Abbey. You just say to them, "Oh, let the kids take over, and we can enjoy being old."
Yeah, you'd think they would, wouldn't you? What do you think, Nigel Nelson?
Well, I mean, I do agree with Narendra. It's not democratic. Our system isn't democratic. It's something that's evolved over 1,000 years to get where we are. And I think that we have a non-political head of state who brings a certain stability to the country. As Michael has just said, it stops extremists taking over. I'm perfectly happy to swear allegiance to the king in the same way that American children swear allegiance to the Stars and Stripes. It seems to be an act of patriotism, believing in one's country, and okay, it's a slightly strange system, but we are a strange country and unique.
Well, you see, I don't see what the problem is. I think it's great. It's a nice, inclusive gesture that people can decide to do or not do. And I mean, I don't share your opinion that people need to have a word with themselves and how. You know, this is just a nice gesture to just. It's your choice. We are a democratic country. It's your choice to do it or not, isn't it?
I think it's just really weird. And the question should be the relevance of the monarchy and the appalling costs of this coronation on public funds. And it should be the question of, it's almost like they're trying to groom the next generation and pledge your allegiance. It's just so out of place. And actually, I think it's doing the opposite effect. It's making people, it's turning them off, the whole coronation and the monarchy. And, we don't want to swear our allegiance to this king, actually. He's not respected. He's not popular. And he seems to be going down the wrong way all the time. And I don't know who's actually advising them. I'm actually horrified about this. And everyone's sitting in their living rooms and standing up and I will serve.
Nah, come on now, you're going over the top there. Michael Cole, what do you think? I mean, I think this is a bit ridiculous, really. I think it's nice. It's a nice, inclusive gesture. You've got an option to do it or not. I'm happy to swear allegiance. I love this country. I'm super patriotic. And I think it's a wonderful inclusion. I'll be there. What do you think, Michael?
Loyalty is the theme that runs throughout this ancient ceremony. And first of all, the king's loyalty is tested. He's asked whether he's prepared to take the oath, and that is the coronation oath, and it's the most solemn and important moment in the whole of his reign. And he has to promise, when he says that he will take the oath, to be loyal to God, to the people, and to the church. And only then, hold on just a second, only then is he anointed. And then he becomes liturgically the king. And then he's invested with the orb and scepter, the symbols of power, in order not for his own greater glory, as the lady on the top right thinks, but to serve the people. That is what it's all about. It's about
What does he do for our people? We've got people going to food banks. And this is a...
Hang on, stop shouting, Narendra. Stop. Hang on, Narendra. No, I decide. Edwina. Can you come in on this and give me your last thoughts on this?
The coronation is enormously symbolic, but it's also a load of flummery. I mean, I should be watching it, thoroughly enjoying it. I've got food organised, I've got wine organised, I've invited in various friends from Ukraine, some of whom will be interested, but they'd be absolutely astonished if I stand up and start swearing to God or whatever in the middle of the ceremony. I'm going to watch it, enjoy it, and I wish him well.
You might surprise. They might surprise you, Edwina, and they might stand up and swear allegiance as well and be thankful and say this is a wonderful country and we'd love to stay. You never know. Edwina, thank you so much. Really good to talk to you. That is, of course, Edwina Curry, Narendra Kaur, broadcaster and commentator, Michael Cole, former royal correspondent, and also Nigel Nelson. Thank you so much. Really good to hear your thoughts. What do you think, Anne? Will you be pledging allegiance? I will. I don't mind. I'm quite happy to go with it. It's, the monarchy is a great thing. I think this country is a great institution, but I want to know your thoughts. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GBNews on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll continue with the great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, should we swear allegiance to the king? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Hi there, it is 4:34. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The government is planning an extra evacuation flight from Sudan tomorrow for British nationals trying to leave the country. It will depart from Port Sudan in the east of the country, where earlier the first shipment of humanitarian aid arrived. British Navy ships have also docked there in Port Sudan to provide evacuation support. Those hoping to leave are being told to get to the international airport before midday. The RSF paramilitary force says it will extend the current truce for a further 72 hours starting from midnight, although the ceasefire has been broken with airstrikes and fighting in Khartoum. That is yet to be confirmed, the extension by the Sudanese army. The Nurses Union has relaxed its strike rules to ensure critical services will still operate during a 8-hour walkout, which starts at 8 o'clock this evening. NHS England says discussions with the RCN have resulted in an agreement for minimum staffing levels to be provided to cover life and limb services. Great Ormond Street is one of a number of hospitals to have agreed to do that. NHS England say urgent care remains the priority. They are telling the public to use the health service wisely. Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, is hopeful a dispute can be resolved later this week.
The Staff Council is due to meet on Tuesday. I'm cautiously optimistic that the Staff Council will agree to then vote in favour of the deal. But I think it's right to wait until Tuesday for the Staff Council to meet. And this strike is premature. I think it's disrespectful to the other trade unions. I think the RCN should have waited. They're a member of the Staff Council. They were part of the negotiations. And as I say, Pat Cullen herself recommended this deal to her members.
5 people, including an 8-year-old child, have been killed in a shooting at a home in Texas. Officials from the San Jacinto County Sheriff's Office attended the scene after receiving a call about some domestic harassment. Several victims had been shot by the time the police arrived. The suspect is armed and believed to still be on the run. The Stone of Destiny has been welcomed to England in a special ceremony ahead of the event. The Coronation, of course, that is. It dates back to the 12th century and is normally on display at Edinburgh Castle. It will sit under the King's throne next week and has been used in coronations for nearly 1,000 years. TV online, DAB and TuneIn Radio, this is GB News.
It's just coming up to 37 minutes after 4 o'clock. Welcome on board. I'm Nana Akua. Now, coming up at 5 in this week's Outside, I'll be speaking to a transgender man who regrets his decision to change gender at the age of 42. And he's come all the way from America. We spoke to him a little while ago down the line. Scott Nugent will be here live in the studio. He's suffered complications, numerous complications, medical complications since his transition, and has advocated ever since that against this. But before all of that, the Great British Debate this hour, that's on the way next. I'm asking, should we swear allegiance to the King? Up next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
How on earth did we...
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, where have you been? It's all right, though. You're halfway through. It's fine. We've got loads more still to come. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Now, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should we swear allegiance to the King? The Archbishop of Canterbury has called upon the public to pledge allegiance to the King during the much-anticipated coronation next Saturday. Now, during the order of service, members of the public will be asked to say, "I swear that I will pay true allegiance to your Majesty and to your heirs and successors according to law. So help me God." I love that bit. It's like so American. Now, this will be the first time the public will have an active role in the ceremony. But for a king trying to modernise the royal family, is this sort of starting off in the right way? Should the coronation be more about the celebration of the United Kingdom rather than one individual? So what do you think? For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, will you be swearing allegiance to the King? Should we be doing it? I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Right, Christine, will you be swearing allegiance to the King?
Yes, I will. It's not obligatory. Nobody has to do it if they don't want to do it. I bet a lot of the people who don't want to do it won't be watching the coronation anyway. But yes, why not? This is it's a centuries-old tradition. We're the second oldest monarchy in the world after Japan. The monarchy is something which holds this country together. It's a celebration of patriotism. We're not swearing allegiance to Charles. We're swearing allegiance to the crown and what he represents and the monarchy. And he derives his authority by Act of Parliament. We have said that we want him to be there. We want a person to be there. It's far better than the crown, far better than swearing allegiance to a flag. I don't see any problem, but this is not obligatory. I think you said earlier, why are people...
I don't know what
Calm
people...
down, Danny.
I don't know what Danny's going to say. I'm trying to read him.
No,
what do you think he's going to say? Stop holding hands, you two.
He is about to burst.
Of course it's not obligatory. It's not North Korea.
No.
Of course it's not obligatory.
Reading some of the rubbish on social media, you would think people were being told that they have to do this. They know they
it's ridiculous. It's like a head of the chickens. We're not going to do it. How dare they? You don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. I'm doing it because I enjoy it.
That people have been told that at this stage in the ceremony, the King will swear his allegiance to us. He will swear to serve us, to spend the rest of his life serving us as his mother did. And people are just being told, if you wish to join in, this is what you say, and this is where
it's going to be great.
No obligation.
But you do realise by proxy you're swearing an allegiance to Harry. Even worse than Andrew for you.
That is worse.
Prince Andrew and Harry.
I'm like Humpty Dumpty. When I choose a word, it means what I want it to mean. And I will overlook the fact that the heirs include Harry and Andrew. I am swearing it to Charles.
I will be swearing it.
You will be doing it as well.
I will, yes.
Oh,
of course I will. Listen, I queued 9 hours to see the Dead Queen. I'm going to take 10 seconds out of my day to swear. But the only thing is, if he's trying to get in touch with the youngsters of this country, what he needs to understand that young people, generally speaking, they're falling out of love with the monarchy. But also, there's
I don't think they are. No. How many young people have you spoken to?
Well, there's a study
that
says...
How many young people have you spoken to?
How
many young... Hang on, wait, no, I'm asking. He hasn't asked the question. How many young people... Do you even know any young people? He doesn't even know any young people. What's he talking about?
Danny is quite a young person.
There's 30% or something
not much younger than me.
30% of young people say that they have an affection with or an affiliate, whatever. So, and also the bit about God, right? We are generally living in an atheistic atheistic country. So I would remove the bit about "so I swear by God," because that's a bit that will alienate people. For example, do you believe in God? No.
I believe that God is within us, so I am God.
So you are God. There you go.
No, I just believe that we are our own, I believe in myself, and I think that I'm a part of something bigger. I don't know what that is. I don't know what I call it, but I'm just quite happy with believing. Listen, I've got nothing to lose by thinking there's somebody up there when I'm gone. At least there'll be sandwiches and stuff, and I'll be treated nicely. If you don't believe it, then you're on a hiding to nothing. You're on a road to hell.
Look, there is...
I hope that this coronation is going to be a really unifying force. Now, a lot of people are saying it's a divisive force, and I hope it will be unifying. Millions of people across the world will be watching it. It's what Britain does best. And we should be very proud that we've got a stable monarchy when you look at countries across the world. And I think, thank God for our royal family. And they work hard, and I am more than happy to swear.
When I think about it, though, they don't do anything, do they? But
what do you mean they don't do anything?
No, I'm teasing.
You tell her, Christine.
Well,
what do they do? I'm trying to think.
She knows
what do they
perfectly
do?
well how hard they work day in and
they just
day
go
out.
to things.
While Meghan Markle is filing her nails, what's she called? The Princess of Wales is out visiting, care homes and goodness knows what. They do work hard.
I think it's important, actually. I'm just teasing. But the reality is that what they are doing, and it's something that a lot of people might not see or understand, but I think most of the British people do, is they're almost providing a wonderful positive energy to the country. And if you don't value that, that's fine, it's up to you. But a lot can be achieved when you've got people who believe in a unified goal, and I think they bring us that.
But also, a few people will be swearing the allegiance through gritted teeth because King Charles does come across as quite apparently woke. And
well, I would
suggest
don't bother to do it then. If you're going to do it through gritted teeth...
No, I'm saying that some people will do it because they think that he's a climate change activist, almost bordering on politics and a bit wokey. And people... Yeah, but you can still have an allegiance to someone at the top of the tree who you think's going a bit... I was going to say mental, a bit woke.
Not going mental.
Look what the choice is. If we don't have the monarchy, we will have an elected head of state. Can you imagine? Just look around the people who might be in candidates. I'll tell you who does annoy me, if I can just say this. It's the leader of Sinn Féin, who's going to be there. The reason why her MPs, when they come to Parliament, don't take their seat in Parliament is because they won't swear the oath of allegiance. So what is she doing at the coronation? It'll be interesting to see whether she swears it.
We'd like her to come and answer for herself. Right, this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. I'm going to head over to Bristol, actually, and have a chat with... Oh, Jackie Sampson, you're there in Hertfordshire, aren't you, Jackie? I don't know why I thought you were late. He was here yesterday. I can't have him twice in a row. It's too much of a good thing. Jackie, what do you think? What do you think? Are you going to swear allegiance?
I thought Charles wanted to modernise the monarchy, and I don't see anything modern about... I know it's not an obligatory thing, but the idea that 150 million people around the world should swear allegiance in this day and age seems very archaic. And I think in our modern world, allegiance and support is earned. And I think that Charles needs to prove himself, like his mother did, serve the coronation should be promising providing an allegiance to serve us, not the other way around. And the short answer is, I don't think we should be swearing allegiance, and I most certainly won't be.
Really? You think you see it that way? I think it's just a nice little touch to get people involved. I don't think it's... And I think it's you're pledging support in a way. They're just saying, will you support the monarchy? And do you feel like, you want the monarchy to carry on? In my view, I don't fancy any more of those flaming politicians, Jackie. You don't want more politicians, right? Yeah, so... But anyway...
Well, if people happy and they get together and they have that nice sense of togetherness, that's great.
Exactly. I'm going to be having a party in my street on the Sunday. Jackie, thank you so much. Really good to talk to you. That's Jackie Sampson in Hertfordshire. She was my great British voice. Well, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GBNews on TV, online and on digital radio. Stay tuned. Coming up on the way at 5 o'clock, this week's difficult conversation. You must stay with me for that one. I'll be speaking to transgender man. He regrets his decision. Scott Nugent, who's come all the way from the States, will be here in the studio to tell us his full story. But before that, it's Worldview, and joining me for that will be Danny Armstrong and host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge, to discuss the top stories from around the globe.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain is watching.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome on board. It's just coming up to 52 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. If you've just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. Now it's time for World View. And all of it, there's a lot of things going on in the world. Ukraine, the war there rages on. A large fire has broken out in an oil depot in Crimea following Ukrainian drone strike. Now, that happened this week. Joining me to discuss this and more is political commentator and Russia expert Danny Armstrong. Danny, talk to me then. So, I mean, the war is raging on. Where are we in the whole thing? I mean, I'm hearing a lot about soldiers as well, and that Russia's army is depleted now. And it's, you know, is there any truth to any of these rumours? What's happening?
Well, yeah, of course, the battle is raging on in Bakhmut. Of course, the longest and the bloodiest battle in the whole of this conflict. Now, what you're referring to is the Wagner PMC, the private military company, and its leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who said we're running low on ammo and we have really, really high losses. And Prigozhin has actually said that he, has threatened the Kremlin to withdraw his troops. It could be a little bit of mind games going on between the private military company and the Kremlin, so you have to take his words with a little pinch of salt. But the meat grinder really does keep going, keep grinding in Bakhmut. Now, just coming back to the fire in Sevastopol in Crimea, that's actually part of a larger Ukrainian offensive. 2 drones hit 4 oil tankers in Sevastopol. As we know, Crimea was annexed by Russia in 2014. Zelensky said during the week that he does have designs on Crimea and wanting to regain Crimea from Russian control, as well as those 4 annexed regions, including Donbass, Zaporizhia, and also Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics. Now, that is the overall plan from the Ukrainian side. Of course, as we know, the motto from the Ukrainian side has been throughout this war that every single piece of Ukraine will be returned before they have any designs on sitting down at the negotiating table. But yeah, the battle raging on, and of course, this attack in Sevastopol is part of a Ukrainian counteroffensive.
Now, what about now? Was there an attempt on Putin's life? Is that a true story?
Well, yeah, it is true, but of course, these stories are very, very layered. Now, this is the story that a kamikaze drone was sent to a industrial complex in Moscow, apparently to target Vladimir Putin. Now, the Ukrainian side, of course, activists have said that they flew this drone through all the air defenses that Russia could offer, and it crash landed around about 20 kilometers away from the industrial complex. It's believed that someone inside Putin's circle had leaked the fact that he would visit this industrial complex, and the Ukrainians decided to seize that opportunity and send that kamikaze drone. Now, it could be just a little bit of posturing, and could be just a little bit of boasting and mind games from the Ukrainian side. But yeah, kamikaze drone sent to Vladimir Putin and crashing down. I mean, I think it's just basically the Ukrainian side saying, look, we have designs on Putin and we can reach him if we want, although it did crash just short of its target.
Well, there's a lot of people probably got designs on him anyway. Thank you very much, Danny. Really good to talk to you. That's Danny Armstrong. He's a Russian expert. Now, travelling over to America and over to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge. Paul, really good to talk to you. Talk to me about Biden. Biden's fundraising. What's happening with him? I mean, he's actually talking about running again. Is he mad? He can't run.
He can't run. No, he's talking about stumbling again. But yes, he announced on Tuesday. We broke the news last week. He was going to announce on Tuesday, and true to form, he did. Fundraising's not going well. Fundraising's if that's an indicator of the amount of excitement in his own party. I mean, Trump raised like 18 million over the last couple of weeks, and Biden's on like 7. And Biden, former Vice President Biden, is technically the resident of the White House. And you'd think that there would be more of a hoopla, more excitement. So this is not going down very well with the DNC. Again, it's an outside bet, but I don't see him actually making it to the final actual election next year. Not in any kind of medical way, but just I think that there's a lot of tectonic plates moving in the DNC to have him replaced before next November. Or November
replaced
24.
with whom? Replaced by what with whom? They don't have anybody, do they?
Well, they've got Newsom in California, and he's coming up on the rails as being the most likely to be able to find funding, profile coming out of a massive state. It is possible that they could end up with a Newsom candidate. They certainly don't want Kamala because no matter what, with all the anti-Trump prejudice, it's likely that Trump could beat Kamala. It's unlikely, with the current stats, the way the DNC machine works, that Biden would lose. This is the problem. But I don't think he's actually going to have the financial support to be able to get there. It's a very taut position we're in at the moment, because in 2016, the DNC really, tortoise in their hair. They didn't realize that they had to do any campaigning at all, and they lost. They're never going to make that mistake again. They throw everything in the kitchen sink against Trump every single time.
And of course, the DNC, you're talking about the Democratic Party, right? Just so when you say
I beg your pardon, yes. The Democratic Party, yes.
Now, can we just move on to Trump now? Trump calling Biden crooked Biden.
Yeah, now listen, I'm the world's biggest Trump fan, but so he used to call Hillary crooked Hillary. And instead of, he hasn't been able to come up with a new name for Biden now. It's like, in 6 years. And so he's basically just taken the name off Hillary, and now it's crooked Joe Biden. I'm a bit disappointed. I would have thought he could have come up with something. He's so good at coming up with nicknames, but he's just retired it from Hillary and handed it over to Joe. Crooked Joe Biden. So that's what we have now. It's crooked Joe Biden. So it's just that's going to be the nickname from now on, which is, like I said, I'm a little bit disappointed on a personal level because I think that Trump's got a better grasp of nicknaming people than any modern politician has ever been able to handle. But anyway, so there we are. So it's crooked Joe Biden between now and November 24.
Well, perhaps he's trying to deflect it off himself, because that would make more sense to me. He's trying to deflect. But I liked his Sleepy Joe. Sleepy Joe Biden was pretty good, because that stuck, because Joe Biden did almost fall asleep at a few things.
I agree. I totally agree with you. The thing is, maybe Sleepy is a little bit affectionate. Even like at the correspondence dinner last night, the lead comedian was making jokes about Biden falling asleep all the time. They're all having a big laugh about it. Maybe people are actually relieved to know that Biden sleeps most of the day through his presidency. So it's it's actually probably working against Trump. So he's gone for crooked. We'll see how that plays out. But I don't know what he's going to call Hillary in future.
Oh, God, yeah, Hillary. She can't come back, and Kamala's no good. Listen, it's fascinating watching the American political system and the machine in operation. Paul Dudridge, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. That's Paul Dudridge. He's the host of the Politics People podcast. Thank you so much. Wow. Can't believe it. Right, you're watching me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on radio. Perhaps you're listening on TuneIn. See you in the next hour. So good afternoon. It's just coming up to 5 o'clock. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio for the next hour. Me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We're debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one is ever cancelled. Now at 5, I'll be joined by a transgender man who regrets his decision to transition, and he did this at the age of 42. You won't want to miss that. That is Scott Nugent. He's come all the way from the States to tell us his story. So it's coming up just after 5 o'clock. Then, the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, are nurses being realistic? When it comes to their pay demands, you know they're asking for a lot. Is it reasonable? But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 5 o'clock. Good evening to you. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. The government has announced an extra evacuation flight tomorrow for British nationals fleeing Sudan. It will depart from Port Sudan in the east of the country, where earlier the first shipment of humanitarian aid arrived. Millions of people remain trapped in the capital, Khartoum. Now, those hoping to leave are being told to get to the international airport in Port Sudan before midday. The paramilitary RSF forces say they'll extend the truce for a further 72 hours from midnight tonight, although that has not been yet confirmed by the Sudanese army. NHS nurses across the country will walk out from 8 o'clock this evening in a 28-hour strike over pay. 54% of RCN members rejected the government's offer of a 5% pay rise. Great Ormond Street, one of a number of hospitals where nurses have agreed to keep limited staff on over serious concerns about patient safety during the walkout. NHS England says emergency and urgent care remains the priority, and they're urging the public to use the health service wisely. Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, says he's hopeful the dispute can be resolved.
The Staff Council is due to meet on Tuesday. I'm cautiously optimistic that the Staff Council will agree to then vote in favour of the deal. But I think it's right to wait until Tuesday for the Staff Council to meet. And this strike is premature. I think it's disrespectful to the other trade unions. I think the RCN should have waited. They're a member of the Staff Council. They were part of the negotiations. And as I say, Pat Cullen herself recommended this deal to her members.
The Prime Minister's criticised selfish saboteurs who force traffic to go slowly. Rishi Sunak told The Sun on Sunday he wants to put a stop to the tactic amid plans to push through measures that would widen the legal definition of serious disruption. That would then enable officers to stop activists interfering with traffic. Labour, though, says the government is merely chasing headlines. Police in Texas are searching for the suspect of a mass shooting in the town of Cleveland on Friday. Authorities say the suspect killed 5 of his neighbours, including an 8-year-old boy, when the family asked him to stop firing a semi-automatic weapon in his garden. The suspect, who is Mexican, is believed, though, to have fled the United States. The British Army has begun rehearsals for the coronation of King Charles. Soldiers from all divisions of the armed forces have gathered at training areas across South London to prepare for what will be the biggest event of their careers, ceremonially, that is. Soldiers have flown home from operational duties or training exercises from as far afield as Cyprus, Iraq, Kenya and Estonia to represent their regiments at the event. Meanwhile, representatives from the nation's faith communities will play an active role in the coronation for the first time, when King Charles is crowned. Leaders from Jewish, Hindu, Sikh, Muslim and Buddhist groups will deliver a greeting to the King in unison. The Archbishop of Canterbury says the service will be foremost an act of Christian worship, but new elements will reflect the diversity of modern society. And the Stone of Destiny has been welcomed to England in a special ceremony ahead of the event. It dates back to the 12th century and is normally on display at Edinburgh Castle. It will sit under the King's throne next week. It's been used in coronations for nearly 1,000 years. More as it happens, as always, here on GB News, but for the moment, it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon, it's fast. Oh, sorry, I should have done that in the gap, shouldn't I? It's fast approaching 5 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Now, still to come each Sunday at 5 o'clock, I'm joined by a celebrity or a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting life, and take a look at life after the job. We look at highs, lows, lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And I'm very pleased to say that I'm joined today by a transgender man who transitioned from a woman at the age of 42. Now, Scott Nugent has suffered from numerous medical complications since his transition and now uses his time to advocate against it. Stay tuned for his story. You will not want to miss that. And then the great British debate this hour. I'm asking, are nurses being realistic? The Royal College of Nursing Chief Pat Cullen has issued a stark warning. She's claiming that nurses could strike for years to come if the government don't change its attitude towards wages. But are her demands reasonable? Then stay tuned for 5:50. Another story that caught my eye, ultra-processed food. A leading food expert claims he will avoid ultra-processed food over the dangers it poses to people's health, as has deemed it dangerous as cigarettes. Email me your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at GBNews. Oh, sorry about that. Right. So, and now it is time for this week's Outside. Now, my very, very special mystery guest is a 48-year-old transgender man who has a very powerful story to share. Scott Nugent was a successful business sales executive named Kelly King, a top performer earner who earned various awards and recognition. However, at the age of 42, he made the difficult decision to transition from a lesbian to a transgender man. And during his medical transition, Scott faced numerous complications that left him with over $1 million in medical expenses and caused him to lose everything he's worked for, including his home, his career and his marriage. And despite these challenges, Scott never gave up. He was determined to be there for his 3 teenage children and push through the pain and adversity, inspiring others with his story of perseverance. He's the founder of the Trey Voices, a group of trans educators who oppose racial gender activism and seek to educate politicians and families about the reality of gender dysphoria. And I'm very pleased to say that I'm joined by the founder of Trey Voices, Scott Nugent. He's live in the studio now. Scott, welcome, and thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you. That was a great intro. It kind of got me. Got me a little verklempt.
Well, it's just incredible, although we are fighting against a mobile phone in the studio making a noise.
That's your phone, you're much more graceful than me. I'd be throwing something at somebody.
I wonder if we can get the floor manager to remove it. That'd be great. Or turn it off. So talk to me about you then, Scott, because I came across you on the internet. I listened to your story. I found it incredibly empowering, very passionate. And I wanted to really get you in and talk to you. And I can't believe that you made your way all the way to the UK.
Absolutely.
To come and talk to me about this. So can you sort of start me at the beginning about you and kind of your life and why it was that you ended up on the pathway that you did going through this particular transition?
Absolutely. That's a long story. I'll try to kind of shorten it down so people can understand. At 42, I was in a very vulnerable place. I was a lesbian, but I had started to come to the place where I was kind of accepting who I was, kind of a strong, very strong, dominant woman. And even at 42, being successful and being that age and in that place in my life, I was married to a woman who was just despised being a lesbian. And that was always in the back of my mind. And so one day we were watching TV and she said to me that, you know, maybe you were born in the wrong body, or we were watching a show and I heard somebody say that on TV and I said to her, sorry, maybe I was born in the wrong body. And she just kind of honed in on that, like, you know, yeah, I'm not a lesbian, you're just a man in a woman's body kind of a thing. And the next week I found myself sitting in front of a transgender woman who asked me, how long have you been dressing like a man? And I've never dressed like a man, but that one sentence kind of changed the trajectory of my life and kind of pushed me down the road to medically transition.
We see that that's, that is incredible that one person saying one thing can affect you in that way.
Well, here's the thing, and I don't think people understand this. We're so at the place where nobody's listening to anybody. We've got one side over here that is screaming, and in those screamers, underneath them are some really nice people who really believe whatever it is that the other person's screaming. But over here is screaming, and then there's really nice people over here that believe, what they're screaming about. But in the middle is the information, and unfortunately, nobody's getting the information. So the information is this: is when you do not fit in society, whether you be same-sex attracted, these people that are being pulled to this, whether it makes anybody irritated or not, they are same-sex attracted, they are autistic, they are, basically mentally gifted, they are, mentally ill. They're all the people that don't belong in society. In a time in adolescence when that's the only thing that you want to do. So if you are 13, 14 years old and somebody says that you can fit in, that's really hard to get rid of. It was hard for me to get rid of at 42.
Wow.
So our children have absolutely no chance with that. Now, with that being said, Nana, there are some people that do medically transition and find some comfort, kind of walk a little bit lighter in life with that. But the people that do well with that, by the way, not very many, but the people that do well with that are people that go into it with the idea that, hey, you know what? This is cosmetic surgery. It's not life-saving, but it sure makes me feel better. For example, I gave birth to twins. After I gave birth to twins, I kind of went, wow, I don't like my I'm going to get a tummy tuck. And so I did, and it made me feel better. Wasn't life-saving. But if somebody would have told me it was life-saving or changed my mind or, happiness was at the end of the tummy tuck, it would have been devastating when I got through that and kind of went, well, God, that tummy tuck didn't really do anything for me emotionally, but, it looks better kind of a thing.
What do you think as you hear that, you hear that the schools and things are sort of saying, oh, no, it's fine, you can be a boy or a girl can be a boy or a boy can be a girl and it's fine, we're gender neutral and all this. Do you think that this is a slow creep into sort of also infiltrating, in a way, the psyche is
So I'm going to shock people. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell the truth to you with this. The majority of people that are pushing that within school systems, absolutely, unequivocally, I believe what they're saying. I think that it's coming from a place of absolute tolerance, love, and justice, they think. But here is the truth. The reason why we're medically transitioning children, the reason why we're medically transitioning adults is because of two reasons. The first reason is financial.
Right.
And I know that here in the UK we have, socialized medicine, all that kind of stuff. We produce puberty blockers in the United States, and I guarantee you when you come over, and say, hey, we need, some puberty, Lupron's not gone. That's the UK, that's free. I mean, there's money being generated. So much money that, I'll give you a quick analogy. In 2015, our governor in Texas started taking money from a gender clinic. We had 22 kids that were on puberty blockers. 2 years later, after he took $2.5 million, that money on puberty blockers went from a $4.6 million gross profit over a 4-year period of time on that to a 4,000% increase. So, $4.6 million. So follow me here. 4.6. Where are you at? $4.6 million went to click just under $100 million in a small area in Texas. So that's a lot of money.
You're saying that this is actually actually being pushed by a lot of the drug companies. I mean, that's kind of what
I'm
you're
not
saying.
saying that. That's the truth.
Is that you think that's how it is?
No,
I mean, obviously those drug companies are here to defend themselves, and they would say that they are trying to.
You know what?
solve
I've
the
been trying to
problem.
get medical people to debate me for 5 years. I had an endocrinologist in Boston Children's Hospital who is the absolute utmost endocrinologist. They were going to pay him tons of money to debate me. He said yes. He found out who it was, and he all of a sudden didn't do it. I even said, you know what? If you do really terrible, we can erase the sucker. Just sit down and talk to me. He didn't do it. I'll talk to anybody, anywhere, about the medicalization of children. It's wrong. Here's the second reason. The second reason why, whether or not this offends anybody or not, males who are transgender or are medically transitioning, a lot of them, doesn't matter if you don't like it or not, have a sexual fetish. And that fetish is only basically fulfilled if people see them as a woman. It's the, trans women are real women. It's because there is a fetish tied to that. So if you basically, use biology with them, they lose their erection. So we are medically transitioning children, so males, straight males, don't lose their erection, and so there's a profit model within this to medically transitioned children. That is absolutely the truth. Now, in the middle are all the people that don't know the truth because of things like what happened at Turning Point with that, nothing bad or good on both sides. They were both being,
And this is, of course, the drag...
there was a rally where, they were yelling, and I was trying to talk, and it was just like, I was in the middle, and I was like, I don't want to be on your side, I don't want to be on your side, nobody's intrinsically evil, but it's like, my God, shut up. In the middle is where the information is. This is where the information is.
It's almost like people don't want to listen to either side, but they don't know what side they kind of should be on, because the truth is that this medical transition is a life-changing thing. And these little increments towards it, so maybe it's the drag side of things, maybe it's the pronouns, maybe it's all, could result in children going in this direction.
It just couldn't.
It seems to be like a slow creep of all different things, even the language changing in the dictionary. Women now, the word woman now encompasses a male who is transgender, and now you have to call it he or she, and everything is becoming so convoluted, and people are very confused. I'm very confused.
Everybody's very confused, but let's get back to one word. Let's get back to one word. The one word that everybody needs to understand is why. Why is this happening? And this is the speech that I was trying to do yesterday, which is this. I'm a lesbian, whether I know I look like a man, but I'm a lesbian that medically transitioned. And so my generation, I'm 50, not 48, we fought for same-sex rights. We fought for what I call righteous rights. Stonewall was founded in 1989. In 2003, they pushed through same-sex adoptions. Those were righteous rights. Those were righteous gays and lesbians fighting for rights. They were fighting for rights like, Pond in Florida that had to die alone without her partner in that room with her. Now, in 2013, Stonewall passed same-sex marriage, not just, contract, same-sex marriage, so that people can die with dignity and respect. Those were righteous rights. Those were righteous people bringing those rights. Those were rights that we needed to have. Now, after that is where my community faltered. And how we faltered was that activism is a business. I had no clue. I went into this thinking I was just going to try to help everybody. This is a business. So when Stonewall got all of those righteous rights, there was nothing else to fight for. And that's why in 2015, in my opinion, they were getting to, the place where they were going to sign bankruptcy. There were no more righteous rights. Well, in that year, they had a 32% year-over-year growth, and the only thing that they did different was to sign on with mermaids who's medically transitioning children. So we are stepping on the children's heads to maintain an organization, to maintain activism. We are medically transitioning kids with all this absurdity so that straight men don't lose their erections. This is the truth, whether it offends you. It's the truth.
But they would argue, and also...
And you know what?
But they would argue. Let me just finish.
Where are you? Come on out.
I wish they would argue.
Let's do it.
I'd love to hear them, but they would argue that they're actually providing a service.
Nobody will debate me.
No, but they would argue they're providing a service. There is a situation of gender dysphoria, and they are helping children, transition safely. They would argue that they are bringing...
Safely? Safely,
This
okay.
is what they would argue.
I know you're not saying this, but here's this. There were 12 medical complications to medically transitioning children. There have been 7 studies that said that it's beneficial for children to medically transition. All of them have either been modified or retracted with oops, it didn't help, or modified with not enough time. The latest study that was just retracted was retracted, and not only retracted, but they found out within that, oh, this is beneficial for kids. They found out that the 12 complications went to 26 complications, and within that study, they hid the fact that 2 kids that were medically transitioning at the time killed themselves, which puts the percentage at a 50% higher rate, and these are the people that are getting all this love. So you're right, Stonewall did do righteous things. I don't believe that they are now.
But talk to me about you then. Let's talk about you. What has this left you with? You've had the transition. You're now male.
No, I'm not. I look like a man.
Okay, so you look like a man, so,
yes.
But because that's where the language is. You're like, well, we don't want people to be offended. So, where has this left you? How in terms of your medical side of things, are you well?
No, I'm not. No, in fact, I'm staying with a physician, and I have another urinary tract infection. I get those, and those will eventually, take my life. And the whole, it's all experimental.
Why have you got something going on?
All medical transition is experimental except for top surgery, all of it.
So your arm, why is that there? What happened with your arm?
Well, that's a bottom surgery. That's a nerve. It's very, very painful. My hand is handicapped. I get infections probably, I would say, every 6 weeks, or when I get stressed out. I have congestive heart failure from a pulmonary embolism. I have to take blood thinners for the rest of my life because, testosterone has basically thickened my blood, whether or not I take it now or don't take it now. I have heart, lung, you name it, I have it. And those are the complications we're not talking about. So we're medically transitioning children that now have 12 complications to 26 complications. Every study that said it was beneficial has been retracted or modified. They have early onset osteoporosis. They are having heart disease, lungs disease. We have 26-year-olds breaking their legs. We have, these kids that can't have children. They're sterile. We have boys that will never experience an orgasm. Not just 1 or 2 that get bottom surgeries or take puberty blockers. And it's not me saying it. The leading transgender surgeon in the United States basically says, hey, every boy that has been on puberty blockers that I do surgery on will never experience an orgasm for the rest of their lives. Is anybody, parent or anybody, to take that away from any human being?
I think that the people aren't thinking of what happens afterwards. It might look like it is. It might, you might look like you're the other sex, but actually there are probably a lot of complications. I think it would be good if more people spoke about that, so that people, parents who are talking about their children transitioning and all of this would understand what this involves. So what about you now? You've been campaigning for ages. We've got about a minute left.
Yeah.
Scott, what's for you now?
Well, I've been doing this for about 4.5 years. I've been doing this nonstop, and I've been doing this because I have 3 kids. I've given birth, and I couldn't look away from it. But to be quite honest, this has emotionally, physically, spiritually just absolutely shattered me, and not just shattered me it's shattered me from a human standpoint. I'm absolutely shattered with human nature, with the fact that people say that they care, but they just want to tweet, unfortunately. We need to talk about this stuff. We're butchering an entire generation of children because of people that want to be social media stars or because they want to make money, and we need to save these children.
So are you... Well, listen, Scott, it's been good to talk to you.
Yeah.
Are you going to carry on with the crusade? Or
No. Today's my last day. I'm serious. Everything's coming down, all my videos, everything. I'm done. I've been beaten beyond a bloody pulp, and I'm done. So I hope there's somebody else comes on, but I need to actually get my life back before I die and have some fun.
Well, Scott, I really appreciate this you coming here to talk to us on your last activist day. Appreciate that. Thank you so much, Scott. That is Scott Nugent there. He's a transgender man. He's been through it all, and he's been working very hard over the last 5 years. But on this issue, LGBT rights group Stonewall have previously said most people who transition do so without any regrets. Detransitioning is very rare, but it does happen. Detransition does not, and of itself, mean regret. It can mean that a person no longer identifies as trans or feels that they are now a different gender to the one they previously identified as. Well, stay tuned. It's gone 23 minutes after 5 o'clock. Coming up, it's the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, are nurses being realistic? All of that will be on the way. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's time now for our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, are the nurses being realistic? The General Secretary of the Royal College of Nurses, Pat Cullen, has warned that the government could face years of strikes and that the triple rates of pay being offered to nurses who worked during the strikes was insulting. Nurses in England are to strike from 8 o'clock this evening, so in a couple of hours, until midnight tomorrow in a dispute over pay and working conditions. And the strike was supposed to last 48 hours, but of course a High Court ruling cut it in half after finding that it was partly unlawful. And yesterday it was revealed that the RCN was working with healthy leaders to provide their own cover after warnings from hospitals, including St Ormond Street Children's Hospital, over patient safety. Average nurse pay has fallen in real terms by 8% since 2010, but everyone from police and doctors to corporate CEOs and IT managers have seen even bigger cuts in the same period. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are the nurses being realistic? Well, joining me to discuss is Roy Lilly, he's the former NHS Trust Chairman, Julia Taylor, a psychiatric nurse, and Stephen Pound, a former Labour MP, and Anna McGovern, political commentator, and also she gets us a lot on GB News as well. Right, let's go for Roy Lilly. Start me off. Do you think the nurses are being realistic? Oh, he's gone. Oh, I wanted to hear what he had to say as well. Oh, well, we'll go to Julia. Julia, we'll come to you. We'll try and get Roy back. Julia, are the nurses being realistic?
Yes, definitely. We are being realistic. It's the government that's been unrealistic. We've got a situation, OK, where there's no recruitment and retention. We've got nurses that are working in the NHS on lower pay than nurses who come in and work on the private sector. We've got nurses who've left the NHS because they've retired and they could come back. They've got a good few years left in them, but they don't come back because they get put on bottom band 5 pay. Can you imagine the insult to a nurse that's so experienced coming back and getting the lowest wage you could possibly get as a nurse? That's what we've got for the people that have left. So they go to the private sector. Oh, I'll go and work in a care home, I'll get 3 times more. And you've got nurses who are doing their training, coming out with £60,000 worth of debt, that are sometimes going either to the private sector or they're moving away to Australia or Canada. So we've got the nurses who are left in the middle of all that with not enough nurses on the wards, and everybody's stressed, everybody's working beyond their means, everybody's doing overtime because there's not enough nurses. And we're trying to get that message to the government. There's no recruitment and retention.
No, I hear you, Julia, but, you know, like people who go to university come out with loans of 70 grand. I mean, I don't agree. I think that ultimately nurses should have bursaries, they should come back. But with that argument, you know, everyone who comes out of any university or any college always comes out with some sort of debt, and it can be quite high. Roy Lilly.
Yeah, good afternoon. Well, look, the reality is that the nurses went into the strike looking for 5% above retail price index increases, which put them at around 19%. Their leader, Pat Cullen, kind of backed off of that and said that really wasn't what they were looking for. The pay restoration argument kind of fell by the wayside. They then said they wanted 10%. Then they said they wanted to debate what it would be. I mean, they kind of ended up arguing with themselves until eventually they got into negotiations and they were offered 5% plus other quite important changes to contract and other stuff. The RCN Council recommended that the nurses accept it. They went to a ballot and quite narrowly, actually, they decided not to. And now, of course, on Tuesday, the important day on Tuesday, is when the NHS Council meet, where all the trade unions will get together and decide what the future is. And it looks like it, I mean, from what we can see, it looks like it will be accepted. If it is accepted, then clearly Steve Barclay will put the money into nurses' pay packets in June. Then the RCN have got to decide what they do. Well, they can't strike anymore because their current window has expired, so they'll have to go back and reballot. Now, balloting their members costs them about £200,000. Wow. They will reballot, and then they've got to decide whether or not they're going to strike again. If they do strike, and this is the important thing, if they do strike, they'll have a 6-month window, which overlaps with the junior doctors' period of being able to strike. If the two of them strike together, it'll be absolutely catastrophic for the NHS. But the way it stands, I mean, I would have thought that given the weight of the decision of the other trade unions, then probably the game's up for the nurses, and I can't see really how the Secretary of State will be moved to increase it for the RCN, but not increase the offer for all the other nurses. So they've the RCN have sort of backed themselves into a corner.
Just a little bit. Stephen Pound, your thoughts?
Yeah, but one person's pay demand is another person's negotiating position. I mean, I've represented nurses in industrial discussions and these debates. Nobody really expected that was going to be the first figure. I quote, Donald Trump in his book, The Art of the Deal. You always start high and settle, somewhere in the middle. But look, the government could win this, no question about that. There's a split with Unison already. However, do they really want to have a bitter, demoralised workforce when we've already got a huge retention problem in the NHS, particularly in the nursing grades? I don't think the government really want to win this. It'll be a Pyrrhic victory, particularly if they get maybe some of the ambulance staff, some of the paramedics, some of them settle, but some of the ward nurses don't. I mean, what on earth is that going to do for patient service? And at the end of the day, we should be thinking about the patients, and we should be thinking about the shortage of nurses and the demoralised state of the profession.
Anna McGovern.
I absolutely agree that the NHS is institutionally broken and it needs a complete overhaul, because especially for patients, there are many people who are on, we have a massive backlog of patients who are waiting for urgent care, urgent appointments. We're now seeing a boom of cancer, for example, cancer diagnosis.
But we know that. So do you think that nurses are being realistic, though?
No, absolutely not. And I think, if anything, they're putting patients' lives at risk by taking this stance, by striking. happening.
Well, what should they do then if they're not happy?
You can use your voice. You can speak to your union, but I think actually when you provide an essential public service where people's lives are being used as bargaining chips almost for your demands.
What should they do then? What should they do?
How do you mean? What should they do?
Well, if they can't strike, if you
I don't think they should strike. No.
But then how would they get more money?
Then you should have. I think enter negotiations. There are ways of doing it that you can use your voice rather than actually removing your services and actually not providing that urgent care that patients need, because people will die as a result of these strikes.
So Anna, should they be allowed to strike at all?
No, they should not be allowed to. Nurses should not be allowed to strike.
Stephen Pound, do you think nurses should be allowed to strike at all?
You can't actually trample over somebody's human rights.
No, it's not trampling over human rights. The police can't strike.
Well, hang on a second. The police aren't allowed to strike, and you talk to average police officers about their pay, and they're pretty bitter about this. I'm sorry. We actually need to nourish the nurses and actually so we have a proper committed workforce.
Pat Cullen is saying that there could be strikes for years to come. So surely if they get settled, they should then. I think they should withdraw the right to strike. Roy Lilly, do you think that perhaps they should maybe come to some agreement where people like nurses can't strike?
Well, it is possible, you can take a reserved occupations of people who do critical work, and you could say you can't strike, but then you have to replace it with something. No, you could replace it. When I ran my hospital, I had a no-strike deal, and we replaced it with pendulum arbitration. So normally when you go into arbitration, as Stephen has said, you go in high, somebody comes out low, and there's a punch-up, and everybody wastes a lot of time, and you end up somewhere in the middle. With pendulum arbitration, you say you want 10, I say I want 5. The arbitrator then says, the ACAS says it'll be 7, and everybody agrees. So there is a way around it, but here's the thing. You have to keep it current, you have to do it every year, and you have to do it and mean it. The problem we've had here is the government have got away with the fact that the RCN and the other unions have been asleep at the wheel for 10 years, and suddenly they've woken up and found out that their pay is 20% out. So it's partly the problem of the unions, and it's partly exploiting from the government.
Willis, we're running out of time, but really good to have you on board. Roy Lilly, thank you so much. He's the former NHS Trust Chairman. Julia Taylor, psychiatric nurse. Stephen Pound, former Labour MP. And Anna McGovern, thank you so much, political commentator. So what do you think, then? Should the nurses be able to strike? Do you think that perhaps they're being way too greedy? Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at GBNews. We'll be discussing that with my panel after this, your latest news headlines.
It's 5:35. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The government is planning an extra evacuation flight from Sudan tomorrow for British nationals trying to leave the country. It will depart from Port Sudan in the east of the country, where earlier the first shipment of humanitarian aid arrived. Those hoping to leave, though, are being told to get to the international airport there before midday. British Navy ships have also docked in the eastern city to support evacuation efforts. Now, the RSF paramilitary force says it will extend the truce for a further 72 hours from midnight tonight, although gunfire has been heard in Sudan's capital, fighting therefore undermining the current ceasefire. The Nurses' Union has relaxed its strike rules to ensure critical services will still operate during a 28-hour walkout, which starts at 8 p.m. NHS England says discussions with the Royal College of Nursing have resulted in an agreement for minimum staffing levels to be provided to cover life and limb services because of serious concerns about patient safety. The public are also being urged to use the NHS wisely. The Health Secretary says he's hopeful the dispute can be resolved later this week.
The Staff Council is due to meet on Tuesday. I'm cautiously optimistic that the Staff Council will agree to then vote in favour of the deal. But I think it's right to wait until Tuesday for the Staff Council to meet. And this strike is premature. I think it's disrespectful to the other trade unions. I think the RCN should have waited. They're a member of the Staff Council. They were part of the negotiations. And as I say, Pat Cullen herself recommended this deal to her members.
And police in Texas are searching for the suspect of a mass shooting that took place in the town of Cleveland on Friday. Authorities say the suspect killed 5 of his neighbours, including an 8-year-old boy, when the family asked him to stop firing his semi-automatic weapon in his garden. The suspect, who is Mexican, is believed to have fled the United States. TV online, DAB and TuneIn Radio, this is GB News. Now it is back to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. Stay tuned with us here on GB News. Lots more to come. I'll be discussing whether ultra-processed food should be treated like cigarettes because a leading food expert says that it should. Steve Miller will be joining me. But before that, my great British debate. Are nurses being realistic? That's on the way next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Britain.
Hello, good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. You can also watch the shows live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua. Now, it's time for our great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, are the nurses being realistic? The leader of the RCN Nurses Union, Pat Cullen, is warning of years of strikes and says that the triple rates of pay being offered to nurses who work during the strike is insulting. Nurses in England will strike from 8 o'clock this evening until midnight tomorrow in this dispute, and the strike was cut in half from 2 days to 1 after the High Court said that it broke ballot rules. And yesterday, the union was working with health leaders to provide their own cover after warnings from hospitals, which include St Ormond Street Children's Hospital, over patient safety. So, for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, are the nurses being realistic? And to discuss that, I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Danny Kelly, we'll start with you. Ooh. Are the nurses being realistic? I mean, look, their pay has gone up considerably, actually, compared to other professions, yet they're still wanting more. What do you think?
OK, first of all, they were unrealistic. That 19% bargaining chip, and I'm a
car dealer, and I know how to negotiate. And two of the panellists were saying basically they were implying you started a ridiculous position, and then someone else started, and you meet in the middle. That's not how it works, because you lose all credibility. 19% was just mental.
Well, the doctors asked for 35.
Well, it's just crazy, and you lose a lot of public support. So their position now is a lot less. It looks like there's an offer on the table. Are they being realistic? I think if they were to accept this offer, then they should accept it, and they are being realistic. The government have come in with a wedge of cash, it's not a 19% pay hike, and yes, it's below inflationary and the cost of living.
But
and all of that.
inflation's a changing figure anyway.
Well, it fluctuates. I've said this for ages, that if public service personnel and employees want something to do with inflation, it should be index linked. So when it drops, so does their salary, and then that would be realistic.
What they had in mind.
Of course it's not. But if they're going to say inflation's at this point, so I want 5% above that, you need to say, OK, well, when inflation comes back down, it's still going to be 5%, but it's going to be a lot less.
Because, of course, you would then target your strikes when inflation is spiralling, like now. So that's...
Yeah, well, I agree they are being totally unrealistic, and I hope to goodness they will settle it. I think they are losing support.
Yeah.
And one thing I think they've lost support over is this High Court action. Now, they are blaming the government. Well, hang on a minute.
Pat Cullen's fault.
Hang on. It's Pat Cullen's fault, because they knew that they were breaking the law by striking on that second day, if they had struck on the second day, because they didn't have the ballot authority to do it. So the government said, hang on a minute, you're going to break the law, we're going to stop you doing this. Had the roles been reversed and the government was somehow breaking the law, Pat Cullen would be the first in the firing line, not the firing line, the opposite behind the gun, to shoot at the government. So goodness knows how much money they've wasted over that.
Well, I mean,
action.
Pat might have thought that it was lawful, though. I mean, but
the train people have, ASLEF, I think it is, have settled. They're going to have to settle. You cannot...
Well, ASLEF, they're paid quite well anyway, aren't they?
If inflation, let's assume that inflation goes on up, which I don't think it will, but if it does, next year in the pay round, that will be taken into account. But they can't have it both ways. They can't trail inflation, shadow inflation when it goes up, when it goes up, and then not when it goes down.
Well, listen, I mean, across the public and private sectors, basically...
I don't think they should be able to
everyone's
strike.
pay is down. I don't think they should be able to either.
They should
everyone's
join the
pay
police,
is down.
everybody.
And this is just some comparisons. The FTSE CEO, so FTSE 100 CEO, says the pay is down by 14% since 2010. So these are the companies within the FTSE. An average IT manager's salary is down about 26% since 2010, whereas as opposed to the nurses, theirs is only down by 14%. And in fact, an average nurse pay has fallen in real terms 8% since 2010. So in actual fact, although I don't think they're paid enough, I would say that now, I think they should be paid more, but their pay has fallen less fast than a lot of other...
What frustrates me, and people on the radio listening wouldn't have seen it, but one of your VTs there, whilst we were talking, I saw a lot of young people. I've seen a lot of people by their very age and how they look. They can only have been nurses for literally 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Now, they knew the salary, and now they're on strike. They knew they were getting X amount, and now they're on strike, demanding more, saying that the terms and conditions of employment aren't good enough, nurses are leaving. And I don't buy this thing that they're going to Australia. I really do. I'd love to know how many nurses have gone to Australia for double or triple the pay, because that's one hell of an upheaval.
Well, if you do go to Australia, the system is different. They have private systems, so therefore you will get more money. In fact, if you went to the private sector, you get more money in this country. So the system is different. So I find it a bit when they say, oh, well, Australia's so much better. It's like, yeah, but then join the private sector in this country, because then you get paid more.
Well, if they want to go to Australia, that's fine, but they should remember what the late lamented Barry Humphries said about living in Australia. He said living in Australia full-time is like going to a disco party and dancing all night with your mother. In other words, it's not very exciting.
Well, let's see what our viewers think of that, because our great British voices are here to tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. I've got 4 of you. Let's start with Dr. Seshni Moodler in Milton Keynes. You are a doctor. What do you think? Are they being unrealistic? Are they being a little bit greedy?
Good afternoon, Nana. You look absolutely stunning, by the way, in blue.
Thank you.
The nurses, I think they are underpaid, they are understaffed, they're working through extreme stressful conditions, and I don't think they're being unrealistic. I think they've given the government enough time to meet their demands. You know, we heard from Steve Barclay and Rishi Sunak's interview with GBNews. It didn't sound very promising in terms of meeting the nurses' demands. I think we need to value nurses more, and I think the government needs to meet their demands.
Well, let's go to John Reid. I agree with the valuing them more, absolutely. I think they should be paid more, full stop. John Reid in Kidderminster. You've got about 30 seconds, John.
Yeah, hello, Nana. 30 seconds to say, with this ridiculous government that we've got,
they've driven us down the road of a market economy, haven't they? And as a market economy, you relate the supply and the demand. The demand is there. All of us have been ill. We've all had COVID and what have you. And all of a sudden, people that have given their hearts and souls to this industry are being told you can't have a pay rise as much as you would like. I think it is realistic for what they're asking for, and we should pay them more. They should be highly valued.
Brian Dugan, what do you think? 30 seconds.
I agree with you, Nana. I agree with the previous two viewers. I think that we do undervalue our nurses and we overwork them. And the average nurse in London, their pay is now less than the average regional wage. I think this is a bargaining position, but I think that we must remember and keep in mind that there hasn't been a real terms increase in nurses' salary since 2010. And that's the reason that we're in this position.
All for anyone's though, Brian. That's the only thing I'd add. Adam Wildsmith, you've got about 30 seconds. He's there in Durham. Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think given that the average pay increase in the private sector last year was about 5%, I don't think the government's pay offer is unreasonable. 5% for this year, £1,600 for last year, but it has nonetheless been defeated by the RCN members. So I think the government is going to have to get in a room with the RCN leadership and strike a deal. It must be noted, of course, it was a very small margin of defeat. It was 54% to 46%. So I think if the government can just be a little bit more generous in its position, I think it probably could strike a deal with the nurses.
Brilliant, thank you for that. John in Kidderminster, Session in Milton Keynes, Brian in Solihull and Adam in Durham. Thank you so much. They're my great British voices. They are great indeed, aren't they? Well, what are your thoughts? Let's move on to this story, though. It's been catching my eye for some time. Could supermarket food be killing us? A doctor and UCL professor, Dr Chris Van Tolken, thinks that most of the food we eat is so dangerous that it could actually come with a health warning. In fact, just like we have on cigarettes. And with obesity and cancer on the rise and the NHS in crisis, is it right to ask the question, could supermarket food be killing you? Joining me to discuss this is former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller. Steve, good to talk to you. Listen, this supermarket food, and by that they're meaning a lot of the packaged stuff, do you think it's killing us? I mean, obviously nobody's forcing us to eat it, mind.
Well, that's the first thing to say is we do have choice. And, you know, there is an argument to say that junk food is cheaper than healthy food, which is actually a myth. If you look deeply, healthy food doesn't have to break the bank. But the reality is, and the research is now showcasing this, is that eating too much processed food, I've got one study here, Imperial College, for example, did a study. Their results are now out showing there is a link. There may be a link between eating too much processed food and a number of cancers. So we do have to be careful. So things like this sort of thing, if you can see it, the old frozen pie. I don't know if you want to buy it.
Pie? I thought it was bread. It looked like bread, it looked horrible. It was revolting.
This is the kind of stuff we've got to be careful of because, yes, it isn't ideal. Now, the other bit of research on a serious note point here is that there is some research now saying that too much processed food can be the reason dementia is triggered. So we do have to be taking it seriously. But there's a big excuse in the country that we need to quash. And that excuse is this, that, as I was saying before, that healthy food is too expensive. It doesn't have to be expensive, but we have to look deeper for it. And I think the supermarkets could also play a role in terms of promoting it so that we actually prove that eating well does not have to break the bank. And I think that's a very important point. Can I give you very, very quickly, though, the supermarket, for you and the viewers and the listeners, here's what to do down the junk food aisle. First of all, if you're desperate to lose weight, get your fat photo out. Look at your fat photo. We've all got one, that dreaded photo. We can't bear it. Look at it. Then look at the processed food, right? Give it the finger wag. Right? Tell it it's been responsible and it's no more got the power. And then the third thing to do in your mind to celebrate the joy is to hum your favourite tune. It's all about motivation, and that's one strategy to get you down the aisle without throwing all of the junk food into the trolley.
Oh, I love it, Steve Miller. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. That is Steve Miller.
You're
He's
welcome.
fabulous. Good to talk to you. He's the former presenter of Fat Families. I used to love that. Right,
What about just avoiding the junk food aisle altogether?
you
That's
can't.
easier.
No, they put it all over you. They make what you want. What you want, you have to go past that to get it. They do it all the time. But now, listen, if you just joined me, welcome aboard. This is GB News. It's now time for Supplement Sunday, where my panel and I discuss some of the news stories that caught their eye. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also author and broadcaster and you ain't written anything.
Oh, I have.
My favourite.
I wrote a cookbook.
Did you?
I've got a
Did
cookbook.
you?
Yeah, it was a PR thing for when I started to work at the BBC.
How many pages in it?
There was about 14 recipes. It was just a bit of things like baked beans with cheese and crisps on buttered toast.
Danny, that's not cooking.
That sort of stuff.
For joining me. Right, who's going to go first with a supplement?
OK, may I? This is just an example of how brilliant animals are. A golden retriever who was given up by his family because they couldn't afford him. Well, anyway, someone adopted the golden retriever. They put him in the car. As soon as they opened the car with his new forever home, the golden retriever bolted. And 27 days later, it went back to its original home 40 miles away. 40 miles away.
This is of his new home?
Yeah, so he didn't want to go to his new home. And as soon as the door opened from the car, from the journey from the pound, he bolted. And 27 days later, he went back to his old home. Okay. It's unbelievable.
It's hilarious.
Sounds like Lassie.
It does, Lassie.
Oh, that's showing my age.
I used to love Lassie. It was great.
Lassie, come home.
That little dog. Anyway, what do you think?
Well, mine, I'm afraid, is a bit more serious. But sorry, that was serious. A bit more close to home. Civil servants who have been labelled in this report snivel servants, they are snowflakes because they have come up with the most ludicrous number of excuses why they like to work from home. One of them seriously has said that commuting to work makes him homesick. Another one has said that being asked to travel to London once a week for a meeting is causing me a great deal of stress and panic attacks. Dominic Raab has said that one of the reasons why he was attacked was because the Mandarins couldn't handle the pace, the standards and the challenge that I brought. And this is the final one. An official at the Insolvency Service, first of all, he called ministers scum, and then he said, I want to see this government obliterated and utterly destroyed. This should not have come to light, but it has.
Wow. I mean, that's the thing with the
travelling to London once a week is stressful. I mean, we manage it, don't we, Danny?
Well, yeah, I hate the place, but I only come because I love Nana and the GB News. Oh, I hate London.
Well, listen, and finally, my supplement, the world's fattest cat.
Me again.
Has finally gone on a diet. Yes, Patches, the internet sensation, has been put on a diet after he weighed in at a whopping 40 pounds. I mean, he currently weighs 38 pounds and is well on his way to becoming a healthy cat. What do you think, fat cats? I mean, have you ever had any pets, Danny?
Yeah, well, we do have 3 cats.
Have you?
What I like
Are
about...
they overweight, your cats?
No. What I like about this story, though, I mean, this is supposed to be like an internet sensation that's dramatically shed half its weight. It's only lost 2 pounds.
I know.
Well, I would love to lose 2 pounds this time next Sunday.
Yes, 2
You never know.
2 pounds.
Look,
That's a kilogram. Go to the toilet.
I've lost 2 pounds
to the
many
toilet.
times, and it's
bag of sugar.
It's hard work. It's a bag of sugar. It's a lot of weight. It's hard work losing that. But people often, though, they think it's kind to feed their animals, overfeed their animals. You see all these overweight dogs who then they end up with crippled joints and goodness knows what. It's not kind to overfeed your animals.
No.
Maybe not.
Are you an animal lover?
They don't like me. My friend had 2 cats and one of the 2 dogs, and one of the dogs just absolutely hated me.
Very intelligent dogs, though. No, they're intelligent. Instinctively disliked you. I know where they're coming from.
No, there isn't time.
Well, listen, on today's show, we've been asking, well, no, what were you going to say?
No, well, we had a lovely cat that took us over. It's 1 minute. 30 seconds.
No, we haven't even got that. On today's show, I've been asking, should we swear allegiance to the king? And according to our Twitter poll, 38% of you say yes, 62% of you say no. Really? I thought you'd be real royalist like me. I'm going to do it all. It's going to be great. Listen, thank you so much to my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Christine, thank you very much.
Anytime.
And also wonderful journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly.
Thank you.
That wonderful slipped out. And a big thank you to you at home for your company. I'll be back next week at 3 o'clock, same time, same place, but actually 4 for the Coronation. I'll leave you with the weather. Enjoy.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to the show. It's Gloria Meets. Coming up this evening, Conservative MP Bob Seeley.
You can't trade on your raw status and trash it at the same time, and that's something that I've got a problem with.
Former Labour MP Ruth Anderson.
One of my big frustrations is actually about self-censorship. There is a huge amount, a number of issues where I think lots of people feel really uncomfortable, especially because of social media, about raising their head above the parapet, about getting involved in a debate.
Chair of the Justice Select Committee, Bob Neal.
I want to try and bring our experience to, try and make something positive out of what was a bad experience for us as a family.